I'm home.
Throws to the near side, and that's intercepted. Intercepted by Jack Jones, heading down the near sideline, and this will be a pick six for Jack Jones and a touchdown for Arizona State.
People here, when you think of Sun Devil football, you think of Sun Devil for life.
Here we go, 7 seconds. Berkovici. He's just going to air it out deep downfield, and no white shirts around. Oh, Jalen Strong! Caught for a touchdown! Jalen Strong makes the catch!
I went to Arizona State. Right. I'm a Sun Devil, man.
This is about the Valley. We need the Valley. If we get the Valley all in, the sky is the limit.
Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
And I'm Joe Healy with DevilsDigest.com.
Joe, the spring game is in the rear view mirror. We learned a lot about the Sun Devils. We had some new questions and some concerns pop up. Oh, yeah, and the portal is back open again.
Yeah, that little downtime that it seemed that we had, that is long gone. The cycle is back in. The transfer portal, which was like kind of out of nowhere, bumped up, right, a couple weeks. That's happening again, so it's like almost Groundhog Day in a sense, where it feels like just at the end of the football season last year, the transfer portal was a big deal. We're right back in there. As you mentioned, spring ball is in the rear view mirror. A lot to talk about in that regard. The weather is heating up here in Arizona, so the springtime in itself symbolically and seasonally coming to a close.
It is indeed, and so to break all that down, plus some basketball and football transfer news as well, couldn't have anything better in store than a couple of aces from DevilsDigest.com here in studio with us to break it all down. It's always great to have a roundtable discussion with these fine fellas. Starting off, Cole Topham for appearance number 9, breaking the tie with Herm Edwards, just one shy of, I believe, being the 7th or 8th member of the Double Digit Club. Welcome back.
You know, I'm going to get my degree in about a month here. And actually less than that, like only a few weeks. But I think that might trump it, you know, my standing on the Speak of the Devils leaderboards. That might trump getting my degree.
And I don't think I'm going to go out on a limb and guess we probably won't have Herm on this show again. So the likelihood of you being able to break that tie, whether it's, in obviously the near term or catching up down the road, I imagine that you'll surpass him before it's all said and done.
All right. And so then a history-making 90th appearance. We are in the home stretch to triple-digit country. Publisher of DevilsDigest.com, Hode Rabino. Hode, welcome back.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Joe.
All right, so let's dive in. Let's start off with a little basketball before we go full-on football for the remainder. Now, of course, the transfer portal is not just open for football again. It is, of course, open for basketball as well, and as is kind of the annual tradition all across the country, not just unique to Arizona State and Bobby Hurley. A lot of turnover. We covered some of the early portal entries a couple on the recent episodes, but since we last talked to you on this feed, one kind of interesting development, and also ASU kind of getting some very talented reinforcements. Starting off, Devin Cambridge, after making the big I'm coming back to Tempe, unfinished business, he's now back in the portal, and with some curious potential visits lined up. What's the latest on Devin Cambridge, and what led him to declare that he's coming back, kind of pulling a Jaden Daniels, just I'm coming back, but then, never mind.
Look, I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record and always, use that NIL crutch as a reason why you have questionable transfer portal entries, but that is the case with 90% at least of the players that do enter the portal, not only at ASU, but nationwide. Devin Cambridge is no different. As many of the listeners probably know, Devin Cambridge did not graduate from ASU. He cannot be immediately eligible unless he gets a waiver from the NCAA. The speculation is that if he is going to get such a waiver, it is going to be because of personal/family reasons. So for him to have a good, if not great, chance to actually get that waiver, he will need to go to a program much closer to his hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. But he was actually in Eugene, Oregon this past weekend, out of all places. I don't think anybody needs to break up a map to believe me to say that Eugene, Oregon is not closer to Nashville, Tennessee than Tempe is. And maybe if by some fluke it is, we're not talking about a matter of just maybe a few hundred miles. Now, another school that he was looking at is Auburn. Yes, the same Auburn school that Devin Cambridge transferred out of to come here in Tempe and play with his brother. And by the way, I mean, some are bringing up the excuse, well, his older brother, Daze Cambridge, is not playing for ASU anymore. He exhausted his eligibility. Therefore, Devin Cambridge transferred out of ASU. Devin Cambridge knew that he was going to play 1 year and 1 year only with his older brother. Devin Cambridge, like you said, Brad, did put out a social media post. I'm running it back. A picture of him hugging head coach Bobby Hurley. So the fact that he's not going to play with his brother is not a reason at all. So again, aside from NIL, I'm not sure what it could be. I mean, he's an entrenched starter. He's a player that ASU depended on quite a bit last season. We're only going to depend on him that much more in this upcoming season. So his support system is just thinking that the NIL dollars are better somewhere else. Again, that he can bank on that waiver from the NCAA, that he wants to move to another program due to family, personal reasons. If he ends up going to Auburn, yes, it's odd. He may be the first player, I think, in the transfer portal era that in the span of 12, 13 months left and returned to the same program. But at least that would give him a better chance to achieve such a waiver. I think it would be extremely disappointing. I'm not saying it just because ASU and Oregon are in the same conference, that Devin Cambridge can actually transfer from ASU to Oregon and cite family reasons and thus gain immediate eligibility. But that's the crazy world of the NIL/transfer portal we live in.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll be tracking that. But ASU did not just lose players. They picked up a couple of very talented guys. Now, on the last episode, we talked about Malachi Davis coming, the junior college guard. But ASU did land a couple of notable commitments. Kamari Lands from Louisville, former four-star prospect, and most recently, guard Adam Miller from LSU scored 11.5 points per game last year. I believe a former top 35, top 50-ish player, started his career at Illinois. What is ASU getting in these two players?
Yeah, I think with Adam Miller, you get a player, I think you mentioned it, that ASU was really strong in the running when he did pick Illinois, the school that's much closer to his hometown of Chicago. But that affinity to ASU always stayed with him. When I talked to Adam Miller after his commitment, he said that ASU was a school that he always followed when he was in Illinois and later on with LSU. And, he's a player that, did score in double digits, for a Power 6 program. So I think that's nothing, to really shrug your shoulders over. I know people are going to point to his not so great shooting percentages, but when I talked to an LSU beat writer, he told me that basically that Adam Miller was somebody who was coming off missing out a whole season due to ACL injury, maybe trying this a little too much. Thus, shot selection wasn't that great. LSU is a program in basketball which some may know was decimated when their head coach was fired due to the same FBI investigation. It also did trip Book Richardson from U of A, among other coaches around the country. So it was just like a very, very messy situation. And again, a player that did have a lot of rust to knock off. So I know some ASU fans haven't been too thrilled about this addition, but I think some of the more educated fans said, well, look at Daze Cambridge when he came from Nevada, and actually not a Power 6 program. His shooting percentages were just the same as a guy like Adam Miller. And we also look at the scoring averages. He's just 1 point off of what ASU lost in DJ Horn, who actually did move closer to home and is playing for NC State. So I think it's a good pickup. Kamari Lands, if ASU is going to have to replace Devin Cambridge, which looks like it will, then in terms of just getting just the same frame physical player, I think that getting somebody like Kamari Lands, who probably would be like a more consistent shooter than a guy like Devin Cambridge, maybe would give up someone in the rebound department in comparison. But overall, I think it's really two good pickups for Bobby Hurley. And look, even for the Bobby Hurley critics out there, when it comes to the transfer portal and even actually adding transfers before the portal ever was in existence, Bobby Hurley does very, very well when it comes to transfer players. So I would not really discount the quality of players that Bobby Hurley brings in the fold. You have to feel bad for him that after a great season, he's losing so many players, due to NIL reasons, for the most part. But I think he's reloading so far pretty nicely.
So between Miller and Lands, when they were recruited out of high school, ASU was either the other finalist or in the top 3, in the top 5. ASU has been a factor with these guys for a few years. Mm-hmm. How does this ever-evolving transfer portal era of college sports impact initial recruiting to where it's not really a you-know-what or get off the pot or, hey, if you're going there, screw you, we'll kick your ass when we play you on the field or on the court. It's now like, okay, I'm not saying everybody takes that mentality, but it can't be something extreme like that because you never know if things are going to cycle back around. So how does it affect recruiting knowing that you might have another shot at these guys 1-2 years down the road?
Yeah, I just think that, look, if you want to add an immediate impact player as a freshman, obviously you go for that. But I think with the transfer portal, Joe, maybe there's less pressure to add those guys out of high school or out of JC because you can get a proven player from the transfer portal that's been there, done that. And a guy like Adam Miller, for example, who scored in double digits, for a SEC program. So I think that as long as you maintain those good relationships from the get-go, and like you said, to your point, you're not alienating somebody and say, to take a dump or get off the pot, but you're just maintaining that good relationship like Bobby Hurley did with Adam Miller that does pay dividends down the road. So, to answer your question, I think the coaches maybe more than ever are really, really careful on how they handle that, the one that got away recruit, if you will, because they know that in case like an Adam Miller or even Kamari Lands, another good example, there's a chance, maybe even a good chance, that you might get him later on from the portal. Kamari Lands, played in an absolutely horrible Louisville program.
They won like 4 games last year. I had no freaking idea until I looked that up.
I knew Louisville had a hard time because they had their own issue with that FBI investigation into recruiting violations. But I was astonished when I saw that they won 4 games. And I talked to the Louisville beat writer, and he said, "Look, Kamari Lands, in a very weird environment and infrastructure, actually did pretty well." And I think the same can be said about Adam Miller. But I think you have to give Bobby Hurley and his staff credit that they're not burning any bridges whatsoever when they're just missing out on the Miller, on the Lands. And those relationships are really paying dividends 2 years down the road.
So a handful of we've seen quite a bit of everything in these entries, and I'm of the belief of just kind of where ASU is with its program. Things are in good shape. It's a tournament team. You ask me, it's a lot better than things I saw with Bill Frieder, Don Newman, Rob Evans days. But you have these maybe up-and-coming role players like a Duke Brennan, like a Jemiah Neal. Obviously, he came back to where, okay, maybe they look at an opportunity to be a starter elsewhere at, the group of 5 caliber basketball program, or someone like a DJ Horn who, is an established starter who can go and maybe take a slight step up. Is it just NIL? Because it seems like it's a surprise that, okay, Hurley gets the extension. That was kind of supposed to lock people in for the most part. You expect there to be some attrition. It's not like they don't know what's going on. These players have been here for, the better part of a full school year, if not someone like Horner has been here for an additional year. Why do you think these surprises popped up with such a large exit?
Look, I said in most cases it is NIL. With Duke Brennan, look, I was impressed what he did as a freshman. Obviously, he got every opportunity in the book from Hurley and the staff. He played ahead of Enoch Bauchi, a 4 or 5-star recruit, on the regular. So for a guy like Adam Brennan and his camp to claim any kind of disrespect, especially from the hometown school, I think it's absolutely ludicrous. So that's a case of pure NIL. Devin Cambridge, like I said, he made a social media post. I'm running it back. A picture of him hugging Bobby Hurley. How does that all change a few weeks later if not for NIL? But a guy like DJ Horn, I will admit that maybe it wasn't all NIL, although I suspect at a more established program like NC State is probably getting more NIL money, but at least a guy like DJ Horn is from Durham and is playing it for NC State. Okay, that has some rhyme and reason to it. A guy like Jemiah Neal, I thought that maybe was NIL / getting more opportunities because Jemiah Neal was a great 6-man, and maybe he wanted to be a bona fide starter for a Power 6 program. When he went into the portal, as great as Jermaine Neal was in the month of March, he really was almost non-existent from November through February. So he thought the market was better for him, and he could actually land in a good Power 6 program and be a starter over there. He found out that the grass wasn't even close to being greener anywhere else, so he did come back. So again, it's not always NIL, but I think NIL drives a lot of the decisions, especially when it comes, like I said, to guys like Devin Cambridge and Duke Brennan.
So if we're talking personnel, Frankie Collins, Warren Washington still technically pursuing their draft options?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of their support system saying, look, why don't you go through the process so when you do it the next year, or maybe in Frankie Collins's case 2 years from now, that you already know what to expect. Both of them left that window open to actually return to Arizona State, maintain their college eligibility. Yes, I know Remy Martin did the same exact path and ended up actually transferring out to Kansas. Obviously, won a national championship with the Jayhawks. But from everything that I'm hearing right now, and I know it's a fluid situation, I do expect Frankie Collins and Warren Washington to get back in the fold. Warren Washington, we actually posted a picture. He was at the spring game.
Yeah, I saw that too. It's like everything's so weird right now. They're like, dude, I'm just going to kick my feet up and just let this dang thing ride out and see, basketball starts in November next year. Whoever the hell's on the, the bench and on the court at that time, that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, so. I was telling my subscribers months ago, like, asking me, is Michael Matus going to come back and everything? I said, well, I saw Michael Matus at ASU basketball game standing in front of the Sun Angel Collective booth. So, yeah, he is coming back. Yeah. So I think if you apply the same logic, Warren Washington will be back, and I think Frankie Collins will be too.
All right, so that's a lot going on the basketball front. But, hey, you know what? We're talking some football. We're going to get into some all the big developments, battles, questions raised of spring football. But before we do that, the football window, the second transfer portal window, is now opened on the 15th, coincidentally, the date of the spring game for the Sun Devils, and will close. This is smaller than the one that came after the regular season. It'll close on April 30th. But, Cole, you were having a good focus all spring camp long on the defensive side, and that was kind of the first wave of these transfer portal entries for the Sun Devils, defensive tackles specifically. Now, granted, these aren't guys that were at the top of the depth chart. Defensive tackle Brandon McElroy, Jaleel Rivera-Harvey, and probably most notably Robbie Harrison are the three entries as of now. And, of course, always the disclaimer, guys can come back after entering the portal. But as of right now, you had that close eye on the defense for the last couple seasons. What kind of impact do those three potential departures have on this defense?
I mean, I think they have their reasons for departing. One of them is because of the impressive play of the freshman, CJ Fight. I mean, he showed out in the spring game the same way. We've been seeing him blow up double teams, stopping the run. And I feel like he's just been able to assimilate into the program and be exactly the type of prospect that Kenny Dillingham and this new staff envisioned he would be. And so when you have a guy so fresh and new to the program like Fight have that much success early on and almost surpass and challenge these guys already, you start to think about like the rest of the pieces on that line and maybe comparing them to CJ Fight and be like, hey, Fight, looks great already. What if we can get more players like Fight and just beef up our interior? Because I think it is a hard gauge to, it is hard to gauge the interior when the offensive line has had its struggles throughout spring. Not to diminish the play of the interior line, but they seem to be getting a whole lot more pressure, this offseason than they were getting, during the season, and they didn't bring in too many game-changing pieces in the transfer portal. So I feel like that should put the context of the defensive tackles entering the transfer portal. But yeah, I think that should be Sun Devil fans' main takeaway is that CJ Fight has been impressive early, and he kind of forced the other players' hands.
Yeah, I agree. Fight was really impressive to me, and it seemed like also Tristan Monday, the Wisconsin transfer, also had his moments as well. But still, losing three big bodies like that, I came into spring thinking that ASU probably needed to add a couple bodies through the portal in the second window on the interior defensive line, and now you're losing three guys right off the bat of this portal. So we'll get into kind of the shopping list a little bit later on. But and also on the other side of the line, the offensive line has a couple of departures. Now again, not guys that were necessarily thought of as certainly starters, or even maybe perhaps not even in the two deep picture. Danny Valenzuela, who did, because of a lot of injuries throughout the course of spring, did see a lot of kind of two deep action, and also Thomas Leboucher, the I believe the French. Not French Canadian, right? Actually,
no, French. Yeah.
French. So two guys that obviously not see a whole lot of snaps in action last season. They are now entering in the portal as well. We'll get into kind of this what we saw from the offensive line in particular throughout the spring, and perhaps some of the concerns that we all have. But what do you think the impact of those two departures is specifically on this group?
Yeah, the departures are going to be really minimal. Like I said, a guy like Danny Valenzuela played as many first and second team reps just because of the injuries and just the incomplete picture that is the Arizona State offensive line. I mean, I know we're going to talk about it later, but it wouldn't be overdramatic by anyone to state that if there's one position that really keeps the coaches up at night, especially on this side of the ball, it is the offensive line. But those departures, I think, are really not going to do much to really shake the ASU offensive line. They just need to get healthy bodies back and just need more capable bodies, if not to be everyday starters, at least to really create good competition, in the two deep. I mean, you look at a guy like Aaron Frost. I mean, we all knew that when the season is going to begin, he is going to be the mainstay right tackle. He did not take one rep the entire spring practice. So when you have that already working against you, and no disrespect to Emmett Boley or whoever was backing him up, I think it was Colvin Garvey was a converted tight end. That kind of really shows you just what kind of issues this Arizona State offensive line was really up against. To ASU's credit, they already added a transfer portal addition, and it's actually a graduate transfer, and that window actually doesn't start on April 15th. You could add prior to that window Sione Finau, who was a backup at Purdue at both guard spots, and some people might roll their eyes at Purdue, but don't forget Purdue played, or as Michigan fans might say, attempted to play Michigan in the Big Ten championship. So, it looks like you're getting a decent player that may not be a starter, but, as far as being in the two deep, he's probably better than a lot of players that are there right now. So I think that it's even less of a concern when you look at the departures of the offensive line when you compare them to the interior of the defensive line departures, but there's really no difference between both position groups. They need help, and they need help right now. I'm really curious to see what ASU can do in the portal.
All right, so we will talk more about the shopping list here over the next couple of weeks. One last name, I want to get your thoughts, Joe, on this. It's probably not a whole big surprise, and just kind of given the depth chart, the ads that they made. But Bennett Meredith, the quarterback, is now in the portal. Personally, I thought he had the second best spring of any quarterback out there. But of course, when you had Drew Pine, you had Jaden Rashada, Jacob Conover is in that mix as well. A lot of arms in that room, but a very talented young man now in the portal. What are your thoughts on Bennett Meredith hitting the portal?
I mean, for him, it's almost the perfect situation because, you look at the names, you look at the fact that they brought in as many transfers as they did and made the marquee signing of Rashada, and it just – and this is not a nudge of disrespect. It seemed like it was just a matter of time. It was a foregone conclusion that he would probably be out of here. But he gets to do that, as you mentioned, on the heels of a real solid spring. So he's got something that he can sell to other programs, and for him, that's awesome. You know what I mean? It's a guy that it would have taken a number of different issues for him to ever see the field here. So you don't want somebody just to be spending his whole college career on the sidelines. So if he has a little something, whether it's tape or just good recommendations that can be made, then that's an opportunity for him to go somewhere and have a shot. That prior to this spring, at least I, from the outside looking in, didn't really know what he's capable of, and he's shown he can compete. Obviously not to the level to claim a starting position or, be in that running, which is perfectly fine, but did himself some favors over the course of the spring. So it makes that's like that Jemiah Neal type of thing, to where Jemiah Neal, it's funny that he's like the one coming back, because I was thinking to myself during the year when he had these flashes of like, okay, this is the prototype of a transfer portal entry. Someone who's coming off the bench and scoring 12 points here, 15 points here, showing that, you get him an opportunity, he could be a starter. Something like this makes sense along those lines, to where he's not getting a chance here. It's not in the cards at all, but he's shown he's got some quality to him. So it's one where, maybe ASU will rue the day that they let him go if he goes out and lights things up, but you also feel, that he wouldn't have gotten the shot here.
And Brad, just to your point, I know you didn't look at the official spring stats of the quarterbacks, but I do have them in front of me.
Fire away.
And you're absolutely right. Bennett Meredith, percentage-wise, was 68.9% completion rate, and that does account to the drops by wide receivers, tight ends. Trent Bourget, by the way, 74.7% completion rate, which is no surprise. I know we'll talk about that position later on, but there should not be any question whatsoever who should be the starter, at least coming into fall camp, let alone, I think, being the season opener on August 31st. But Bennett Meredith, I mean, I know it's somebody that even the ASU coaches said, look, I mean, you can play at an FBS level. I might even take it a step further and think that maybe some Power 5 programs could use somebody like a Bennett Meredith, maybe not as a starter, but maybe as a backup. But I think kind of like the unspoken truth over here, and maybe inconvenient truth, if you will, is that players that were not recruited under this coaching staff are going to get more benefit of doubt than players that are coming from the older coaching regime. Now, obviously, when you have quite an impressive film to show, like Trent Bourget, Jalen Conyers, Elijah Badger, Ro Torrance, the list goes on, then yeah, you're quote-unquote safe from decisions like this. But the coaching staff has more of an affinity to a guy like Drew Pine, obviously to a guy like Jaden Rashada, who's definitely the future of the Arizona State quarterback room. So that squeezes out Bennett Meredith. But to Joe's point, I mean, I was definitely impressed by what Bennett Meredith showed. Again, he said second best quarterback in the spring practice. The numbers literally bear that out. Don't be surprised to see Bennett Meredith do well, definitely at the FBS level, maybe even at a Power 5 level down the road. I think that guy definitely has a higher ceiling of potential than people might give him credit.
Yeah, I'll be pulling for him for his success wherever he lands. Nice young man in the conversations I've had with him. So before we dive into this,
well, let me ask: is it going to be a situation of Brady White, Bryce Perkins, where fans 3 years from now will be like, crap, I wish we would have kept that guy instead of the others?
After he throws for 12,000 yards at Troy?
Yeah, like
that sounds like a classic battered ASU fan syndrome.
The precedent has been set long ago. So
that is true. That is fair. I mean, Joe just bring up a fair point. I'm not saying he isn't. But.
All right, so one last personnel note before we dive into all the spring. ASU did pick up their third verbal commitment of the 2024 class and is the highest rated, a blue chipper, a 4-star, but also a local recruit. After picking up a couple of 3-star commits, wide receivers out of Texas, Dylan Tapley out of Desert Mountain in Scottsdale, 6'4", 205-pounder, an athlete, a guy who can play some safety, can play some wide receiver. I know Cody Cameron wrote some great things in the huddle about him and what he's seen from him on the field. What does this say, Howard, about finally the activate the valley, and working to repair those relationships? That the first local commit that they're able to get in this 2024 class is not just a guy that's local, but a blue chip guy.
No, you're absolutely right, Brad. I mean, you want that first domino to fall as far as securing the best in-state talent. And when you start with a guy like Tapley, a 4-star guy, a legit top 10 in-state 2024 prospect, that is one hell of a way to start your in-state portion of your recruiting class. And just generally speaking, I think that in the next couple of years, you might see more of the same, where ASU is not going to have a recruiting class that's going to be star-studded with 4 or 5-star prospects from all over the country, not only here from the Valley, but really going to lean pretty heavy on the transfer portal. So I think that ASU just feels that right now they still got the luxury to be pickier, if that's a word, with the high school prospects and the junior college prospects, for that matter, and really put more weight on the transfer portal. And not to go off on a tangent over here, but with the NCAA sanctions that should come down probably in the next few months over here. I think with all the recruiting constraints that are probably going to go into place, reduction in scholarships, reduction in hosting recruits, reduction in actually going on the road to evaluate recruits, it really probably behoove a school like ASU, which really is going to be saddled with those hindrances to actually be more dependent on the transfer portal as it is. But, back to the Dylan Tapley point. So, yes, if you're going to land somebody from your backyard and from the high school ranks, why not make a guy like Dylan Tapley, a guy that ASU legitimately beat Oregon and U of A for his services, a guy that still remains to be seen. Will he play safety? Will he play wide receiver? Maybe even play tight end. I mean, he really is that versatile of a player. So I think, again, when you just talk about really firing that opening shot of securing the best in-state talent in the 24 class, Kenny Dillingham is definitely off to a good start.
All right, so as of right now on the Rivals team rankings, now granted, super early, but ASU with just the 3 total commits is now 4th in the conference, 46th overall, average star rating of 3 1/3. So we'll see if this staff can keep that momentum going. All right, so before we dive into the players and the battles, there is one notable, I think, spring game-related item that's got a lot of folks talking, because Kenny Dillingham wanted to activate the Valley. They had it on the same day as Pat's run. Now, the attendance was, in his words, disappointed. But, it is what it is. It's a spring game. Do you guys put any stock into attendance of the first spring game and kind of the experiment of having it on the same day or just a couple hours after the Pat's run event?
I mean, I don't. I just think that there's no real spring tradition here. It was, I think, a pretty nice day, but it was still right when the weather was really kicking up warm for the first time in the year. It's a tough deal. Like, I can understand the thought process maybe like from an outside perspective looking in on, hey, it's Pat's run. That's a day that 30,000 people are around. Let's get them involved in something else. But I mean, even as someone who's been heavily involved in Pat's run, at least in the past, not as much now as I used to be, that's a long day. Even for the people that are running, it's a long day, and putting
it's like a couple hours between after the race kind of wraps up before the game.
Yeah, I mean, what time did the spring game start? Was it noonish? Yeah, and the run usually starts at 7, and you've got people processing in and out and kids and stuff like that until about 10-ish, something like that. Or you have the people that are finishing at a normal pace and they're done it by 8, 9. However you slice it, you've got 2-3 hours in between. That's kind of a bit for the non-hardcore fans to say, hey, I'm going to go down to a bar and have a couple drinks and food for a couple hours, then swing back to the stadium. For a lot of people, it's just, want to get home. So it's a tough deal. There's never really been anything that's worked. And I don't say that as a slight to anything. It just strikes me as just not the opportunity that some may think it is. Again, I've never seen any circumstance, no matter how much excitement was going on. Even, I don't know, the Todd Graham heyday when, you won 10 games, you got high expectations. This is the highest point of enthusiasm this program has had since '96, which it realistically was. I don't remember there being anything too wild in that regard of tens of thousands of people there or something that seemed like a legitimate crowd. So I personally don't think much of it. I got no problem with Dillingham obviously wanting to, pack the house and believing that. You want people to have, high expectations and things like that. But I think that it takes ASU fans a lot to get on board with stuff. I mean, heck, people are, really having to bang their head against the wall just to get a substantial amount of people to show up to games, let alone a circumstance like this. Now, I also understand, reading conversations that have been going on in the huddle and that sort of thing about how, there probably could have been a lot better efforts made for like the game day environment on that. I know people had their qualms with certain concessions and things like that, or a lack of activities. I mean, maybe if there would have been something of substance on a formal scale, like if ASU put together some sort of thing in between where it's like, hey, we're adding value for you all to stay right here. Don't be tempted to go to your cars. Don't be tempted to go to a bar. Don't be like, you know what? I'm more tired than I thought I would be. Let's just go home. So, it can be something to put together in the future. It's just it's a really tough thing to get together. Like I said, the bottom line of it, in my view, is it's difficult to get people in the stadium when the action is live, when it counts toward the standings. What are you going to do when it's, in many cases, a glorified practice that, isn't going to be a win or a loss over an opposing team? So I didn't have the expectation that it would be something out of this world. What it was is just kind of in line with what I thought it would be. I can't really offer any sort of alternative. I mean, if they had it at night.
Yeah, that's one thing. Because do you think it at night would move the needle at all or in a substantial way?
I don't think so. I think it's got to be so much more like the peripheral thing. I mean, the night would probably be better, but not by leaps and bounds. It would somehow have to be some like all-purpose entertainment situation of, Jimmy Eat World's doing a free concert. I'm trying to think. Or Gin Blossoms. I'm trying to think of some, local band. Yeah, like somebody's doing a concert, or there's something, or there are games, or even stuff like autographs. You kind of get that all the time. There's got to be some real like, okay, this is like a festival type of situation that includes a spring game, not just. It sucks to say this, but basically you got to give people a reason to show up other than the game itself. Mm-hmm. So it'd have to be something way outside the box that really dips into the game day type of experience or entertainment experience aspect of things, and we know that element of this athletic department is taking the shots that it's taken from the public, and it is what it is. So yeah, it would to me it would have to be just some major event that happens to include a spring game.
So here's one thing and this is kind of just the embodiment of the Onion, like worst person makes a great point meme. Auburn head coach Hugh Freeze, and just generally bad human being, had a pretty good idea. Or at least not maybe a good idea, but an interesting idea. And I want to get all your thoughts on this. For a spring game, play another school. And so, whether that might be just like maybe just you're in an FCS in-state school, or you get like a G5 or something. My idea, if you're going to try to do that, you play U of A every year, and the location is determined on who won the Territorial Cup a couple months prior, and that way you get a little juice, and a little has more of a game feel to it. I mean, there are certainly complications and such. Because you're probably in those cases just going, especially when a new coaching staff is putting in new systems, maybe the spring games you're just going super vanilla and all your stuff. Mm-hmm. But maybe it's just another something to get a little. I mean, because you're not Alabama, you're not Nebraska, you're not just you don't show up and have 40,000, 50,000 people at your spring game. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on just getting another team? You'd have a controlled scrimmage. And try to juice things up that way.
That sort of thing, or have like a flag football game with like alumni, like baseball has had an alumni game for its. I don't know if they do it for fall ball, if they do it for the stuff to start their season. Like, something that would be a real unique idea. That kind of tips itself into like preseason football to where how hard are you going to go after things. But I mean, I think the idea, it's something out of the box for sure.
It'd be kind of hard. To really just go full go. Obviously, the quarterback would have to be off limits for both teams. Is it really going to be honored by your ASU player X or
can you get a targeting? Can you get a targeting in a spring practice that keeps you out for the first half of the season opener? Or can you just beat the crap out of people?
Yeah. But to your point, Brad, I mean, look, everything that ASU ran in spring game, and not only ASU, every team. For that matter, is going to be vanilla. I mean, you have a crowd over there, maybe not a great crowd, but you still have a crowd that can film everything on their phone, and you have the Pac-12 network. So I mean, the vanilla part wouldn't be an issue. But I think a lot of coaches would be really apprehensive. Like, okay, even though you're going to swear in a stack of Bibles that the quarterback won't be touched, and maybe it'll be thud tempo and not live tackling. I don't know, because I think this player or that player might stray away a little from that. And look, I mean, not to like sound biased over here, but I just think that the rivalry between ASU and U of A is so heated that to have like a tame spring game is just not going to happen. I mean, there's a better chance of blizzard hitting here.
Like,
tomorrow.
Could you get a high school team in? Could you get like? I mean, there's really no. There's the kind of that pseudo junior college. I mean, is there anything? Again, from just the entertainment perspective, if you had like the spring actual game, and then if they did like a flag football game of like active versus alumni, I'm thinking of like in fraternity terms, like something. Again, something that's even remotely feasible. That would be interesting because it's just I can't think of any real way where you're just having a normal spring game that is going to draw anything other than what it is, unless you've already built up this culture, which based on the expectations that a lot of people have that they being fans require before they're willing to give that level of allegiance. I don't feel like people are ever going to get to that point because that's something that is just a very dramatic landscape shift. So
it does suck that Colorado sold tickets to their spring game, and they're getting 40,000, 50,000 people. I mean, I'm sure that sticks in the craw of some ASU fans out there.
Yeah, but not enough to do anything about it.
I'd love to see like a skills competition because I mean that was one of the funnest parts about practice under Dillingham was the main event. Everyone gets excited.
Robbie Harrison running routes.
Yeah, Robbie Harrison running routes, but also if you could involve the fans in some way, right? It's like you share the spring game and all the details to like 5 different people. Your name gets entered in a raffle to go participate in one-on-ones or something like that. Or at one point, the players go into the stands and pick their champion from the crowd, and then they pit their champion against another player's champion, and then eventually you go 1v1 against Roe Torrance, right? And see if your champion
Always
can
Roe.
Get off the line against Roe. I mean, there's just so many ways to make it feel like the fan is part of the program, is engaged with the program, and that's been something that's been lacking over the last few years. And Dillingham's doing a great job, and he has a lot of things on his plate.
Let him call plays. Let the fans call the plays.
It feels like the spring game was supposed to be like his first statement of I am changing the way things are. And the spring game attendance at least only solidified that it's going to take a whole lot more than some social media engagement from Dillingham and this new staff. Like they've already made leaps and bounds, but it's only showed you there's so much farther, more ground to cover. I guess in that aspect.
And I think like the Pats Run thing again, I think it needs to be a separate day unless you like back it up right. I mean, and trust me, I've been involved in that from the planning perspective for better part of a decade. And there's a lot of variables when it comes to the time and when it's going to finish and clean up and et cetera. So it would be I'm like trying to convey a thought that I know is not very reasonable, but basically have like a 1 hour gap, not this 2-3 hour, like have it to where people can still hang around, get some things going on in the concourse or the surrounding area, have some, and again, I don't even know if this is something that like ASU can do, if they can contract like food trucks, or do they have to go through their own food providers and things like that? Like, could you have it be a community event to where it's like, hey, we're going to allow 20 food trucks, so first to sign up, you can show up, and you have just this little like almost food truck potluck thing going on in the stadium, or in the outskirts of the stadium, to where people can hang around, do that, maybe do like locker room tours, kind of like what they did in that season opening deal last year, to where you got some pretty, and I checked that out. It was a cool thing where you had, interviews. My dad did a few panels with like 4 or 5 different groups of people. You got to tour the locker room. Like if you get some kind of insider access type of thing to where, okay, you're there, we're going to keep you here, but we're not going to make you just go sit in the stands for an hour in the sun while we clean this up. It's like, let's do something. That's the only way that whole thing could make sense, because again, if you give people the opportunity, or if you don't give them a reason to stay, and you're giving them 2-3 hours on a warm day that they've been up early and physically active, that's kind of a tough deal there. So like I said, it's I know I have zero problem with Dillingham being ambitious about that. I like people aiming high. A lot of people gave Todd Graham crap about making, national championship wristbands, but hey, that's your job as a coach, is to have high goals. So I don't typically ever expect it to be a big blow up thing, just unless there are some major cultural differences, which include but are not limited to wins and losses. Because like we said, there's been some successful seasons here over the last maybe decade or so, if we're talking kind of like the social media era things, that really didn't tip things into a drastically different direction when it comes to this. So I don't think anyone should I saw Facebook is obviously a cesspool, but something like I saw some person who was criticizing Kenny Dillingham, kind of like saying that ASU was sold the bill of goods because he couldn't get a lot of large crowd for the spring game. I did see our good buddy Ralph Amson get involved in that in a positive way. But like those kind of things, like there are people that are thinking that now after that turnout, which is wild.
All right, so let's talk about what we saw in the spring practice. There was 13 practices that we, the media, could go to and attend. There was a kind of a walkthrough that was kind of behind closed doors after one of the Saturday's practices was pushed a little bit. And then, of course, culminating in the spring game. Just, I think the first thing that, talking about, just, the three of us were there at all the practices, that the vibe and energy around this program from the first practice on, I believe it was like after the first break, after warm-ups that we got to see, Kenny had him go back 3 times. And it was you have to go back and you have to run to the next position. Just like something that, an attitude of just kind of finding that line between, hyper competitive, but also fun and making it, engaging for the players. You mentioned, Cole, the main event sessions, which was really kind of an exercise in creativity. Just, some days it might be just the offense and defense run one-on-one routes against each other, and just but the roles are flipped. That's why we had defensive tackle Robbie Harrison run a route with left tackle Isaiah Glass in coverage. Or sometimes they brought out a basketball hoop after some players were talking smack to each other, who's the best hooper on the team. Overall, what were some of your impressions just about the vibe, the energy, and just because we were there last year, we saw what the feeling, this kind of the energy in the air, or perhaps the lack of energy was, and just how you guys kind of just that struck you, and kind of comparing the 2022 team to at least the spring of 23.
I mean, it's just fast paced all the time, and I would say that the pace the first week was a step up compared to the following weeks. But that first week, you seriously felt us as the media were having to run back and forth from field. I mean, I can only imagine what it was like for the players. But I think there's something to be said for when you are in a fast-paced environment and you have to learn on the fly and quickly incorporate information that your coaches are giving you and just implement it in real time. It forces you to lock in. You are forced to be engaged in the activity. And so, for some of the players that weren't solidified in the 2-deep last season, it was kind of easy to clock out, and just kind of go with the flow of things. And that isn't going to be acceptable under Dillingham anymore. He wants 100% engagement from every single player, because your number could be called at any time to go out there and compete.
I think we see Kenny Dillingham having a lot of Todd Graham in him, and obviously when he was on ASU staff, he was under Todd Graham back then in terms of the accountability. And like you said, making sure that you are going to run between segments in practice. And if you don't do it right the first time, you better do it right the second time. If you don't do it right the second time, you're going to do it right the third time, and so on and so forth. But you mentioned just really finding that golden path between being accountable, having a standard of discipline, but still having fun. And I think that Kenny Dillingham is being able to walk that somewhat thin line very, very well. And that's why players are having fun, but also at the same time do not want to disappoint him, because they actually know what he actually demands from you in terms of accountability and in terms of discipline. So to me, just that juggling act that Kenny Dillingham and the whole team really had to go through each and every practice, that was fascinating to see. And I think for the most part, it really, really did get executed to the fullest capability. I think maybe there was one practice, maybe even two, that Dillingham was not pleased with the energy and the passion, and to no one's surprise, next session, that was just an afterthought, because it was just a brand new team on the field, and Kenny Dillingham after practice would come and say, "Yep, this was much better." So Kenny Dillingham's brutal honesty, I think, is just applied in the correct and the most effective measure to have this team maybe even overachieve this season. But it was fun watching spring practice, no doubt.
And it seemed to be like a method to the madness. I think at one point he said, talking about just when players, there's science, whether it's dopamine or whatever, some chemical, when it's released, that when you're having fun, sure, it also enhances the ability to learn. Mm-hmm. And then also it just he was playing, I think in a good way, in a good sense, playing mind games with his players, mm-hmm, particularly I think in the offense, where we're just they make a good play, but no, there's a holding or some flag, which I was okay. Some of these seem but also just to see how they would react to various situations. That one scrimmage where I believe it was on April 1st, where he has them line up on the goal line. They're going to run a lot of sprints. Actually, it's a dance party or dance off competition, but oh, wait, after all that fun, no, we're going to go out there and resume the scrimmage just to see like how they react from having that kind of just emotional fun high to, oh, no, we got to get back into battle. So I do think, and Cole, I think you and I talked a number of times about just like very specific situations of just like, if it's 4th and 3 or we're going for it or something. They practice situations where after a big gain down the field and then having players to sprint 50 yards down the field and then start running plays and continue to drive. Just like that kind of granularity kind of really stuck out to me in terms of just a different approach and just a way to kind of put his stamp, at least initially, to these first 15 sessions.
I mean, even Dillingham, he'll tip his hand and call out the play call for the defense and be like, yo, BJ, we're running straight at you. Make a play. I mean, and of course he's shouting all this like over the microphone. Every single player can hear him. So there's no excuses that you missed something because your head coach is booming over the loudspeakers. I think just the manner in which practice is run is just very efficient, very technical. Dillingham's making sure that his players know what to do in certain situations in spring, much less fall. Where I'm sure they have an entire boot camp on those sort of things. It's really encouraging to see, especially from someone so young.
All right, so let's dive into the position groups before we kind of get into some of the big picture takeaways. Obviously, the main events in terms of the battles and position groups, quarterback, the race to be QB1. Trenton Bourguet is coming back after his starting the last half of last season as well. Drew Pine, the Notre Dame transfer. You got the blue chip arrival, the true freshman, and Jaden Rashada. Bennett Meredith, we already talked about. He's going to be looking elsewhere. Jacob Conover, the guy who threw for all those yards at Chandler. I think we all agree that Trenton Bourguet looked the best throughout spring. At least to me, he was in command, and you saw that rapport with the returning playmakers. It really kind of jumped out to me. He was the most consistent. He's always been accurate. He's not going to wow you with his physical tools, but thought he threw well with good anticipation, threw guys open. Football IQ off the charts. He obviously is feeling comfortable in this offensive scheme so far. But now having that off-season foot surgery looked a little bit better, moving out there a little bit, fully healthy. Never going to be known as a runner though, obviously. But to me, right now, clearly the QB1 in terms of leading this race. I guess just want to get your guys' all takes. How big is that lead?
Huge. I don't think it's enough for anybody to make it up. Even Bennett Meredith stayed at ASU, he would not make it up. I don't think Drew Pine would make it up either. I mean, sure, there are some new toys for Trenton Bourguet to play with, but you still have the main aerial targets in Jalen Connors and in Elijah Badger. Even a guy like Gio Sanders. So I think just having that chemistry, having that built-in relationship on the football field definitely gives Bourguet a leg up. And so speaking about that foot surgery, somebody in the know told me that Bourguet really had to accelerate his rehab because otherwise he would have missed a good portion of spring practice. At least not doing the 11-11 segments because you were there, Brad. The first week we did not see Bourguet in 11-11 segments. So maybe that's why Bennett Meredith, really was able to actually have a very good first week of spring practice, and Drew Pine, I think did okay. But once Bourguet was in the thick of things, I mean, you could definitely see the separation, which just grew, wider and wider. And going back to these, official quarterback stats, Drew Pine adjusted completion rate was 68.2% again. Trenton Bourguet is 78.8%. And kudos to the ASU staff. I mean, the distribution of reps between Bourguet and Pine is ridiculously close. It's actually a difference of 4 reps. So this staff definitely gave Drew Pine every opportunity to establish himself as a QB1, show that he's equal to Bourguet, maybe show that he should start over Bourguet. And Drew Pine has not grabbed that opportunity. So I definitely have my doubts of Pine being able to do that in August. I don't think Pine is a horrible number 2 quarterback by any means. I think maybe compared to a lot of other number 2 signal calls in the conference, he might be one of the better ones. And obviously, his experience he had in Notre Dame, and I know Notre Dame fans aren't too keen on Drew Pine, but I think if you went into the season with Bourguet number 1, Pine number 2, that's not a bad depth chart of quarterback at all.
Yeah, Pine for me, it was just like I was never. There was one practice I thought he had a great day, but other than that, I just thought it was a lot of like at best just like okay, and then there's some like I thought some cringeworthy days that he had where there was like a lot of just like one hops and a lot of times I felt like he was just kind of never comfortable really in the pocket too much. That he was just a little bit slow in terms of his reads and whatever. Some like Manny flashbacks of just like he felt the pressure. Now, granted, you do have to I think couch this a little bit in terms of just the offensive line was not good throughout most of spring at all. Defensive line and Brian Ward, I know we'll get to that, Cole. Like he was like bringing all kinds of creative pressure, so it's making lives miserable. But he just was never too impressive to me. What did you see out of Pine? Because obviously this is a guy who last year at a high level, or at least for a high level program, put together some decent numbers, had some big wins. But again, to your point, Ho, like a lot of Notre Dame folks I knew, they were happy to see him go.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of the same things that you did, Brad. I mean, mostly what shocked me was all of the strengths that I saw on film about Drew Pine, which was throwing with anticipation, which was kind of shot selection, if you will, just about where to place the ball, and then just the added mobility on top of that to escape the pressure, extend plays, throw off platform. He had every opportunity to show that during spring camp, and they didn't feel like strengths to me at all. They felt more like areas of improvement, and especially since he did have a week on Trenton Bourguet to kind of show the Arizona State coaching staff like what he was made of, and then Trenton came in, and it was clear that he had the playbook down pat. He had the established chemistry with his receivers, and just kind of seemed like he fit the offense like a glove while Pine was trying to still figure it out. I think it was like the second to last practice or the last practice where they did like a big play situational thing where the defense is gassed because they have to charge 50 yards downfield and then get lined up against the offense. And the very first play, Pine holds on to the ball too long and then throws an interception, kind of like what you were describing off that one 1 foot hop.
Was that the back of the end zone by Shamari?
And Shamari Simmons just comes and coasts and intercepts it right in the end zone and just ends all the momentum from the big play. And it was just like some of those situations where you have an extra down, you can throw the ball away or at a playmaker's feet, and you just live to survive another day. And I felt like Pine was feeling the pressure a little bit and felt like he needed to do a little bit too much each rep to just kind of keep the play alive.
Obviously, the big name that a lot of fans were really eager about, Jaden Rashada. Very clear from the jump that they're wanting him to just kind of watch, absorb, learn. But his physical talents, when he was throwing the ball, great zip, great arm talent. But Joe, this is a guy that obviously is in the spotlight, has been in the spotlight, obviously with all his recruiting saga. Now, he says he's just happy to be in a healthy environment. He seems to be enjoying himself, at his father's alma mater. What do you feel, would be the message to ASU fans who just see that this blue chip quarterback, this high profile guy, but that might want to see him just kind of jump in and get going from the get go?
I mean, first, nothing makes you appreciate peace in your life, I don't care what you're doing, than having the lack thereof in your life. So I can only imagine what it's been like over the last year of his life leading up to his time actually enrolling with ASU and being able to play football and just escape the hoopla that existed. So I think that's in and of itself got to be relieving, just to kind of get down to what you're here for. No doubt. I mean, you're going to have fans that probably want him to be the starter right now, especially maybe the ones that aren't listening to me telling everybody to, subscribe to the huddle and that sort of thing. And then, let's say if Bourguet is the starter, if the first pass of the season happens to be incomplete, then they're going to be going crazy. So that element is going to be there, and that's what happens when you have that quarterback of that caliber. We didn't have to deal with that in 2019 because there really wasn't that much opposition for Jaden Daniels. So it's a unique situation because I really don't know what the overall public view is on Trenton Bourguet. I mean, I'm a huge fan. I'm not like the others in this room to where I can be as biased as I want to be. So I want him to succeed. I want him to have some redemption because, there might be some people that lump him in a negative way with just a season that went to absolute hell and, a really obviously very difficult finish in the Territorial Cup game down in Tucson. If he would have be able to pull that one out in his, near his hometown, that would have been something awesome. So I'd love for that opportunity, and he's doing it on the field. So I truly hope that fans have patience and understand that, this staff doesn't have an agenda other than to put the team in the best position to win. So, this isn't a team that has a staff that has many holdovers with the exception of Sean Aguano. So, they're not going to be playing political games and having a guy be the starter just because he's the returning starter, just because he's an upperclassman, just because he's this or that, or, saying maybe he transferred. I'm certainly not saying that happened with Bourguet, but just, behind closed doors conversation or something weird, some conspiracy theory that somebody can have. So if Rashada happens not to get much time or if he redshirts, there's a reason for that. Now, if there's a role for him, and that's what I'm kind of curious what y'all's input is can he be the – I mean, I guess Michael Eubank might be the only player that I can think of who really got in a niche kind of role as a young quarterback who wasn't the starter. I mean, we really just haven't seen a lot of that at ASU over the years where, you have somebody that comes in for a few snaps, here and there, other than to replace someone. So patience would be my thing is, it's pretty rare around here for a true freshman to play a lot at quarterback. Jaden Daniels, I think, was the first starter in a very long time. So don't have that isolated short-term memory of, well, Jaden Daniels played just a few years ago. It's easy. It's like, well, that was really the exception to the norm around here. But if things happen to, go in a direction, let's just say if Trent Bourguet is the starter, say if he does get injured, say if just some things fall apart and kind of like with Emory Jones last year where he just isn't up to it, then we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Jaden Rashada, Joe's absolutely right. Everybody should really be patient with his progression. He is the future. He does not have to produce in 2023 for ASU to have a successful season. I mean, the same cannot be said about Bourguet and Pine, but on Rashada, he definitely does not have to be successful for ASU to be successful. When you look up, if I'm going back to the quarterback stat numbers, he actually received the least amount of snaps. I'm going to talk about snaps, by the way. I'm talking 7-on-7 and end team segments. But his completion percentage was 73.1%, which was a tad lower than Meredith, and was really just number 3 among all the 5 quarterbacks that took reps during the spring practice. And Jaden Rashada is somebody, and I know Brady can attest to it too, as well as Cole, that we just saw him just get better and better week after week. And I think the ASU staff did a great job of just spoon-feeding him so slightly, and then just putting more and more on his plate. And it was pretty evident, I don't know how much we're going to talk about it, that there's definitely a separation between Rashada and Jacob Conover. That goes without saying. That's just as strong as a statement that I believe in as Trent Bourguet being the undisputed starter right now. Can Rashada have an outstanding August and leapfrog Pine to be the backup quarterback? I guess it could happen, but I think you have to be like really, really careful not to shake Pine's confidence, because now that you don't have Bennett Meredith, I think you need a competent and confident Pine at the number 2 quarterback. But if the coaching staff, and I'm not saying they're going to do this, but if for some reason they inadvertently or not, are just going to give Rashada more and more opportunities that are directly going to hurt Pine, that could be an issue. So again, with Rashada, patience. Maybe in 2024 we can start talking about Jaden Rashada having a realistic chance to be a starter at Arizona State, but it's not going to happen now. And again, if Rashada is the number 3 quarterback to start and end the 2023 season, that is totally fine. That is not going to dictate the success of this Sun Devil offense.
Now, one thing that I'll add, kind of to supplement what I was saying earlier, is though definitely fans should have patience and play the long game. However, I guess I can't blame them if they feel an atypical sense of urgency of this guy is, a highly regarded recruit. Oh my goodness, he's not the starter. Oh my goodness, he's going to transfer. Even if that path is, and I'm certainly not saying that's the case. I truly believe, and I think the world of the entire Rashada family, and I'm really excited for Jaden to be here and for the legacy to continue. I think that is awesome. Harlan's a great dude, his dad, so that's something that's awesome to see. I have trust that they're in it for the long haul. I think just if you're going to come to a school in this circumstance and see what's there, especially because all of those transfers happened before he signed. It's not like he signed and then they added them, where it's like, okay, I thought it was going to be the backup. Now I'm battling for fourth string. So with all that writing on the wall, you would think that the family and the student athlete himself has a mentality of, okay, we're going to compete like hell this year and do what we're going to do. I mean, we're not coming here to sit on the bench. But understanding that, yeah, you do have an incumbent starter. You've got another with major program starting experience. So maybe the immediate outcome of being the starter is again, what you aim for, but maybe not what you expect. But also knowing that 1 year from now, things are going to look a lot different. So if you have that patience, so that's what I'm going to be interested to see. Again, we're forecasting several months down the road of, are we going to, I know, Brad, how you get the fire everybody tweets from like 1 second, if the kickoff is returned more than 5 yards. So I wonder if that's going to, that narrative, is that going to come into play just with how things are in college sports of Jay needs to get his time or he's going to transfer. Again, that's a fan perception, not something that I expect to actually be the case, but it could be just a thing we got to see on Twitter.
All right, let's put a bow on the quarterback segment with just our personal leaderboards, our rankings of just how we feel coming out. Obviously, one of the guys in this competition is no longer going to be part of it. For me, it was Trenton Bourguet, pretty sizable gap down. I thought Bennett Meredith was the second best quarterback. He was the most consistent, not perfect, but I thought it was better than Pine. I think his arm was better. Showed some surprising mobility. Was it Meredith Cole that had that little he busted in the open field in the spring game and had that kind of nice little hitch and it put that move on the DB?
I think so. I think you're right.
Yeah, so he's got a little sass to him. Then I think Meredith was a little bit better than Pine. Then Rashada, I think, ultimately overtook Conover, who had a relatively rough spring. Yeah. Guy who looks like he needs some. Well, he's very young, obviously, just the year at BYU, but I think he needs some time and some seasoning. But for me, Trenton was clearly head and shoulders above the rest, and then probably my hottest take, I guess Meredith was better than Pine.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I feel like, again, I'm on a different level than the others here as far as access and everything like that. My thought process was that it was Bourguet's job to lose, not necessarily an even playing field, and it could make him better. You think about when Blake Barnett was brought out here, a lot of people were saying, okay, that guy's going to take over for Manny Wilkins, and never saw a lot of action here. He had a decent career at South Florida, so things worked out for him. But Trent Bourguet is just a perennial overachiever and someone that overcomes odds. That's just basically been his MO pretty much since he was in high school. So, and I think he's done enough to where it doesn't rattle him. So you bring these people into play. I don't think he panics. I think he prepares. And as we know, if we talked about ad nauseum, that's his bread and butter is the mental aspect of things. So that it could be an iron sharpening iron type of situation. And so I think I would be perfectly happy if Bourguet's the guy, and I hope that others, understand that if he does continue to be the starting quarterback, that he certainly will have earned it, and therefore would deserve it.
All right, let's talk running back. Now, this is a position that had some depth concerns, just some guys getting dinged up, and apparently, nothing too terribly serious, but it ultimately resulted in Javen Jacobs making the switch from wide receiver to running back. But for me, the big headline coming out of this group out of the spring is that Cam Scatabo is a goddamn beast. This guy is fierce. Tackling him is just about as unpleasant a thought as can be, because he was putting the hurt on defenders all spring long, especially when they went full contact. folks that were out at the spring game, I mean, he probably had, over 100 yards total offense from line of scrimmage. Just real good. And this is probably a situation where, unlike the last several years, there's probably not going to be a guy getting 70, 80% of the touches out of the backfield.
Yeah. DeMar Richard, I love you. Cam Scatto was DeMar Richard with athleticism.
DeMar Richard could have had like a 99-yard touchdown against U of A if he could have just, you know what I'm talking about in that last game? Yeah. But I love the guy. Absolutely love him.
Somehow he had that 93-yard touchdown against New Mexico.
It was a reception, too.
Yeah.
But all jokes aside, he reminds you a lot of DeMar Richard.
Love DeMar Richard.
Even down to the number 4.
Yeah, and low center of gravity. Like you said, Brad, you'd rather just spend a whole summer in Maricopa County without an AC rather than Cam Scatterbo, coming your way even once trying to tackle him. But he does have some moves in the open field.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I don't know. Do we see that much on film from him as far as those moves go? I don't know, but
his lateral agility is surprising.
Yeah, I mean, I was just really, really impressed with that, first and foremost. And now the big question to me is, okay, ASU every year talk about running back by committee, 1A, 1B, okay? And here comes Benjamin, and here comes Rashad White, and here comes Xavier Valade, and the player behind them, most cases, Daniel Ngata, who's now in Washington, doesn't get to see barely any reps on a Saturday. Is it going to be the same thing with Cam Scatterbo or Tevin White, who was banged up for a good portion of spring? Can he really be that 1A to 1B with Scatterbo? I'm really, really curious to see what does materialize in August. But Scatterbo, one of many transfer portal bullseyes, in my opinion, by the staff.
I just kind of like the misfit aspect of this team in the position that we talked about. I mean, you got, a 5'5" former walk-on quarterback who's a starter who's looking pretty good. I'm exaggerating with the lack of height for Trenton Bourguet. And you got this smaller white dude coming from the FCS level. Like, these things don't make sense, but it could be awesome. It could be, something that is fan favorite type of stuff. But yeah, Scatterbo was a guy that, was, I don't know if I identified it as such when we did preview type of things, but like that was the guy that if I'm looking at the entire roster, offense, defense, special teams, and saying, like, I'm really eager to see how this one player performs over the spring. That would have been the number one thing on my list because he was a beast at the level that he played, and you just wonder, does that, translate in the elevation? And it seems like so far so good. So a lot of weird things because we talked about in the preview stuff for the spring about how we all pretty much agree. It's like they really ought to go get a running back who can play in the transfer portal after the spring. Do you still feel the same way?
Probably not. I mean, we can talk about the other running backs in the group. I mean, Javen Jacobs is forced to make that move from wide receiver to running back. And wide receiver is pretty deep, so I think Jacobs would get lost in the mix anyway. But Javen Jacobs has really made that transition, quite seamlessly. Again, if I had to compare him to somebody, I would compare maybe to DJ Foster or maybe even to Jamal Miles. Going,
I was just going to say with DJ, like I know that he's not in like an on-field coaching role, but I wonder if his presence, and I know that he's obviously known Javen Jacobs for pretty much his whole life, so they come from the same background. I just wonder
That's why he wears number 8.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder if like that helps that transition, that he's in the building every day and like he bounced around. That's the perfect guy to at least just have around to be able to consult with, even though he, again, has an existing relationship, but he's there every day. He's an employee now. So that cannot hurt, even though he's not necessarily a proper coaching staff member.
Yeah, and I guess behind this offensive line, I don't want to, beat this group to death, but, Scatterbo is getting a lot of those yards, not because there's, Grand Canyon-sized gaps for him to run through.
A lot of after contact.
And then guys like Javen Jacobs and DeCarlos Brooks are just content of just going off tackle and doing some damage in the open field. DeCarlos Brooks, the transfer from Cal, I think had a real nice spring, and not coincidentally, when Tevin White and George Hart, for that matter, had to sit out. That's when DeCarlos Brooks, I thought, really shined in the running back group. So, to Joe's point, I mean, maybe it's a group that pre-spring we thought they might have to get another guy in the portal. Coming out of spring, I mean, assuming that Tevin White and George Hart are going to be fully healthy in August, and from what I'm hearing, they should be. It's a really pretty nice running back group and offering diversity with different running styles. Again, big question to me: are we going to say that running back by committee, or is Scatterbo going to be the 2023 Xavier Valade, for example?
Yeah, and they're getting Kyson Brown over the summer, the 2023 signee out of Texas. But yeah, going back to Carlos Brooks, he was a guy that I just found myself every day tweeting about a couple times at least a big play, whether it was as a receiver, as a runner, even in like a couple sessions where it was like inside run and the defense was getting the better of the offense. Well, except for these 3 or 4 plays where DeCarlos had a big gain. So he really kind of jumped out to me because he's a guy who hasn't produced a ton at Cal during time, but another local guy. But, for me, Cam was the big takeaway of just like, this guy's beastly. And he seemed like after, at least 2 or 3 times every practice, like you were like, oh, man, is he hurt? Because he was just kind of slow to get up because he was just taking and dishing out a lot of big punishment. But a battering ram, just like it was really, really, really impressive. And then you add the agility and the juke aspect in there. It's like I feel a lot better about the running back group now than I did 5 weeks ago.
I think that's one thing that, again, from the outside looking in, kind of catches my slight concern of, does he play with his hair on fire too much to where will durability be an issue? I don't know if that was ever an issue at Sacramento State. That, again, when you think of that, someone who's not this huge Kalen Ballage style player, but he plays like Kalen Ballage should have played. Is it something that can catch up with him durability wise? Although within that thought process, I am thinking of the old Herm Edwards style of, we're going to give you and only you the ball 20 plus times a game. If it is something that is scaled back just a little bit, and I'm not necessarily, advocating it, but there's a path here. Things can be different. It's not, you think back to where, if Benjamin would have gotten hurt, ASU's complete offense would have tanked entirely. You think back to that the bowl game when like Kyle Williams was playing running back and AJ Carter fumbled the first snap. And so, wild times, but may not be quite the same. But yeah, you got to be impressed with Scadabo, and he's something about him just seems like a guy that the fans can really, really get behind. And I think that that's something valuable when you're looking for, people want any opportunity, want any reason they can to get excited about things. And so obviously winning cures all that, but you want to have it on like a smaller scale of, this underdog story that still is for Trenton Bourguet and a unique story that is for Scadabo, where it's just like these storylines that are popping up here and there across this team that, again, can make it like this bad news Bears situation that might work out.
All right, let's move on to wide receiver, and a lot of new faces in this group in terms of what they were able to add through the transfer portal. But Cole, Elijah Badger is back. I know that you're pretty fond of his game and what he brings to the field, and it seems like after the breakout season he had a year ago that he's kind of taken a couple steps forward so far this year.
Yeah, no, I think you saw the same player during spring that you saw last season. Just somebody that's competitive and head and shoulders kind of above the competition. But I think that ASU dipping into the transfer portal, bringing some pieces to kind of surround their ex-receiver isn't, the worst thing for Badger. Like, he's going to probably, get a decrease in targets, but when you start thinking about yards and touchdowns, about how that might translate, there might be more opportunity for some big plays, some one-on-ones, because the defense can't divert their entire resources to bracketing him, the entire game. So I think we kind of saw that in spring where, Elijah, he'd kind of get the defense's attention, but then Gio Sanders would make a play or Jalen Connors would have a big catch, and then, suddenly the defense has to focus on elsewhere, and then there's Elijah Badger on a fade route, and Trenton hits him perfectly. I think we saw that play like four or five times in spring, and then we saw it in the spring game.
Yeah, and then one of those guys that's certainly going to catch some attention from opposing defense is Xavier Guillory. This was a guy that I believe on day one in the main event burned his man, turned around, pulled up the deuces, cheetah style, on the way for one of 2 very long touchdowns that day. And he just was, whether it was like beating his man deep or catch after, or run after the catch on some shorter stuff, or even just kind of the route running in the red zone, this guy is going to be a difference maker. Of course, the Idaho State transfer, he has the frame, good size, the speed. Now, all of a sudden, you put him, across or opposite the field of an Elijah Badger. What do you do? And you have Conyers and the tight ends in the middle. Like, this is a weapon for the Sun Devils.
Yeah, we could sit here and talk about a lot of not only transfer portal bullseyes, FCS transferred portal bullseyes for the staff. And Xavier Guillory is definitely, if not at the top of that list, or maybe 1 and 1A with Cam Scatabo, for example. But that's somebody that actually I did have high expectations for, because he put up really good numbers at Idaho State. And when you just saw his film, and I'm sure Cole would back me up on this, you could see a lot of traits that could translate very nicely, not only to FBS, but actually to a Power 5 program. So to me, I'm not saying Scatabo was an absolute shocker to me the way he played, but Guillory is somebody I expected a lot from, and I think he definitely fulfilled each and every expectations. And like I said, like you said, Brad, with this creative offense, I mean, it's really going to be for opposing defenses, pick your poison. And Guillory is one of those poison pills that Arizona State has. It's an arsenal.
And then you look at the slot position. Of course, Gio Sanders coming off his major breakout season a year ago, but now all of a sudden you got a couple of guys that are factoring as well. Melquan Stovall, I thought, was probably better in the earlier parts of spring. Had a really, I think, fantastic first 2 weeks, and then there were some drops here and there, but really proved that he can be a contributor here. Jake Smith was out of the lineup for a while, but near the end was able to come back, and in the last couple of practices in the spring game, he's a former top 50 overall recruit in the country. So you have those two guys on the outside, and Guillory and Badger. Then you bring in that trio there in the slot. Joe, what do you like about what those guys potentially? A guy like coming off a breakout year like Sanders, but also some a Jake Smith if he's able to stay healthy, and a Melquan Stovall who's had productive seasons at the FBS level.
I mean, what it tells me is there's going to be competition. And that's going to make everybody better. It's a similar narrative as we were talking about with the quarterback, the iron sharpening iron factor of things. As you mentioned, Sanders was an outstanding player last year relative to what had been seen or not seen prior to that. I mean, it's just a great story as far as what he was able to put together. And so now that you've arrived, you've done that. There's no rest for the weary. You can't rest on your laurels. You have to be a team leader and continue to progress, because Stovall is a vastly experienced college player. I think he has over 100 career receptions, if I'm not mistaken. Jake Smith is such a wild card that I think a lot of people who are a little bit more in tune to either the high school football in the state or recruiting or both, that they're going to really want to see what he's all about. And I'm in that mix because, my goodness, I mean, the national Gatorade player of the year when he was at Notre Dame Prep, not the state player, not just the state player, but the national, the top. Somebody picked him as the number one high school player, high school football performer for that year. So that's a big deal. Now, granted, a lot has happened since then. He's made 2 other stops. So, that's going to be a wait and see type of deal. But that's what strikes as me is competition and depth. I mean, golly, think back to how we were describing the wide receiver group last year, especially in like fall camp. So after you lose Pearsall, and you didn't know what the case was going to be. Now, granted, the position group played better than we probably would have thought. Didn't think Badger would have quite the breakout year that he did. Hoped, but didn't necessarily think. Sanders came generally out of nowhere. So I think there's a lot more confidence in this overall wide receiver group. And there are even some names that haven't even come up yet in this discussion that could have some potential. So, once again, I think it's something that gives that starting quarterback, whomever it may be, a wealth of riches. It's just a different landscape, different narrative than what we've had in the past years, or from the beginning of the Herm Edwards era to last year, where you always knew that you'd have an established running back, so you've got somebody that you can rely on and figure you're going to run the hell out of the ball. You got an Eno Benjamin, you got even an ex-Valade who hadn't been here, but he had 4,000 yards, whatever it was. You knew he could do it. Rashad White, of course. So now it's a little bit of a shift that we're not used to, where all right, you have some confidence in your wide receivers, certainly in your tight ends as well. So these passing targets, you're feeling pretty good about it. Now it's the running backs that you're not too sure about. So it is kind of uncharted territory, at least by comparison to maybe the last 5 years or so.
One guy that I thought was really intriguing is Troy O'Meary, the Texas transfer. Big body dude, 6'3". I think he might have had second best catch of spring ball, and we'll get to the guy who had the number one catch here in a moment. But is near the end of, I think it was maybe the Tuesday or Thursday of the final week. Just went up and just like high pointed the ball using every inch of his big frame. Caught the ball, took a hit, and held on as he took a pretty nasty fall. But I mean, when you add in like Conyers, Swinson, Badger, But just like this, talk about guys with sheer size, like this could be a matchup problem for some defenses if O'Meara can find some consistency.
I'm thinking like 12 personnel, and then you maybe by chance put Troy O'Meara on the line. It's like a 13 personnel guy that can still has the all the stuff that you like from a wide receiver. Like, I think there's a lot of potential for O'Meara in this offense, especially as the ball gets towards the 30, the 20-yard line, and you're looking at taking shots at the end zone. I mean, there's not much better targets than Troy O'Meara with his size and his ability to just post up smaller defensive backs and just clamp down on the football and come down with some pretty tough catches. If you absolutely need to convert a third down at the sticks and Troy O'Meara's there, like you got to feel good about that 50-50 shot. So I can see the ASU staff using this guy in a lot of ways.
So, Ho, there's a couple guys that we haven't mentioned yet that have been around the program for a number of years. Chad Johnson Jr., Andre Johnson as well. That I think they had some moments. I think Chad specifically took some steps forward this year. But we've talked about a lot of guys already so far. Is there enough? Are there enough balls to go around? I mean, how does this position go? And let alone there's a couple guys in the 2023 class that'll be arriving over the summer. How's this all going to shake out?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the 23 guys arriving, I don't know if they really should affect the Andre Johnson and Chad Johnson. Although Corbin Hendricks, to me, is a really, really intriguing just because this is size being 6'3", so another physical wide receiver, which, besides O'Meara, I don't know if really ASU has, that much of it. But, you do have Andre Johnson, yes, one of the more physical wide receivers for sure, but just the inconsistency, if you're Andre Johnson fan, just really, really does frustrate you, and you do see that, really from him in spring practice. It's not uncommon to see in the same series he's just dropping the routine catch and then making an unbelievable reception just one play later. Is it going to be hard for him? Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be. I mean, I think that him and O'Meara would really battle for those second team reps. Chad Johnson Jr., yeah, I definitely was impressed. I think that just in terms of all the fall camps and all the spring practices he's been through since he arrived at ASU, I think this was his best series of practices. So I might feel a little more confident about Chad Johnson Jr. Finding his niche in the 2 deep and getting more reps on Saturday compared to Andre Johnson. But to everybody's point over here, there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of bodies, a lot of talent at this wide receiver group. And, again, going back to my earlier point, I do feel that it's only human nature for a new head coaching staff to give more of a leeway, more of the benefit of the doubt to the players that they recruited rather than the players that are returning from last year's team. We'll see if it does hurt Johnson & Johnson.
All right, now going to a position group where everybody's back. But that's a really good thing because Jalen Conyers, I joked around, but he's leveled up to the point where it's got to be Jalen effing Conyers, like Bobby Hurley style, because this guy just at times was just making obscene plays on a routine basis. And mentioned the best catch of spring. I don't know if you guys can think of another one that was better than when he had Ro Torrance draped on him in the end zone, and Conyers just turns around and just palms the point of the ball. Casually, just boom. And there's nothing Rowe can do. 6'3" DB. But just that kind of stuff. And this, in an offense that prioritizes tight end play, that uses multiple tight ends, having a guy who should be, all-conference guy in Conyers, Messiah Swinson, I thought, looked more consistent than he was a year ago. Bryce Pierre even looked a lot better, had some good moments, especially, I think, over the last 2 weeks of spring. I mean, this is, you mentioned 13 personnel, perhaps. I mean, this you got some dudes at a position that, again, the annual thing is ASU can use tight end this year. Well, I mean, the proof is right there. As long as they're keeping the offense, these tight ends are going to get a lot of chances.
Yeah, this year is happening, and last year we'd see the tight ends get utilized at practice, and they would get a third of the targets on the field. It just didn't make any sense. Those guys were some of the best playmakers on the roster, and they just weren't getting any run time when the actual games were being played. So yeah, I caught a lot of flack for not putting Conyers as one of my winners for spring ball, and it's just because I feel like we saw what he did last year. It was pretty amazing what he did, 5 touchdowns in 6 games, and then he just continues to like posterize people in practice. Like, I just kind of accepted that that's who he is. Like, he should be used as one of the main receiving threats on the offense. It was a crime that he wasn't last year, but Dillingham gets a chance to right those wrongs, and Conyers told me he wants to double the number of touchdowns that Oregon scored last year, and that was 10. I think with that group of him and Messiah Swinson and Bryce Pierre, it's entirely feasible that happens.
And you look at the relationship he has with Bourget, going back to the starting quarterback, expectations, and you look at how things shifted. There were obviously 2 major things. They didn't equate to a ton in terms of wins and losses, but when Sean Aguano took over the offensive coordinator duties essentially and absorbed them from Glenn Thomas, and when Trenton Bourget got inserted as the starting quarterback, lo and behold, you had that stretch that Conyers had at the end of last year that I know I did some math and some research where I couldn't even find like a tight end at ASU that had ever had those numbers across that span of time. We're talking not Todd Heap, not Zach Miller, not Chris Coyle, not anybody that I've seen. So if you do have that returning starting quarterback in Bourget and the relationships that not only were there but have emerged, I'm sure, tremendously over that time period and will continue to grow over the coming months, that just makes it even more difficult for opposing defenses. Conyers is just a guy. He strikes me as a guy that, on and off the field right now is operating on max confidence. He's someone that, I don't know, maybe a year ago didn't know. Again, you wonder what goes inside these guys' heads to where, okay, am I going to get the opportunity? Am I going to get a chance to show what I can do? Can I really do it at a high level here? Any number of things could be going through people's head. Then he does that, was consistent about it for nearly the half a season. Like, I know it seems like it's a small chunk of time, but it was not nothing. It's enough of a sample to where the guy can do it. And like I said, confidence is booming. He's someone that should be one of the most productive tight ends in the conference, or maybe even at a higher level. Again, the sky is the absolute limit for him, and he's not the only one from that position group. It's a scary thing, and I feel so hesitant to talk about potential with tight ends because it is just the ongoing topic that, like, every year we talk about it. But it seems like maybe this is actually the year that it could happen, that depth and production-wise, the tight ends could be something different than we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, one quick note, Brad, you did say that everybody's coming back, and that's a good thing. I did interview Brian Ward, the defensive coordinator, before spring practice, and because he was the defensive coordinator at Washington State last year, I just asked him, hey, what did that scouting report look for Arizona State when you were the defensive coordinator for the Cougars? And one of the things that he told me just right off the bat, he said the ASU tight ends, we felt that they and Utah had the best tight end groups in the conference. And if you're just following the Pac-12 conference in general, that is high praise. When you're talking about guys like Kincaid and Keithy for Utah, I mean, players that, let's face it, have been a thorn in ASU's side for the last couple of seasons. For an opposing defensive coordinator in the Pac-12 to say that about the group of ASU tight ends last year, and this is only a better group, I think, this year, just a year older, a year wiser. That really does say a lot about this group. It's definitely not a lip service that this tight end group is going to be a big part of the passing game. And again, I think we saw quite a bit of it when Sean Aguano took over as the interim head coach, and basically just forced the issue, like, we are going to involve a guy like Jalen Conyers in the offense because it's a crime not to. And Jalen Conyers repaid that confidence by Aguano tenfold.
So moving on to the offensive line, less optimistic coming out of spring than perhaps on the skill guys. There were some injury issues that should be pointed out. Talked about Ben Coleman. Unfortunately, he has a leg injury that might keep him out, as Kenny Dillingham said, maybe in October, November. Aaron Frost did not participate much during spring practice, or really at all. Bram Walden was out of the lineup a little bit as well. But overall, the guys that were in there, collectively, the offensive line was at times rough. How much are you writing off in terms of just like key guys, key cogs that were going to be looked at to come in here and start and play key roles, or just simply not in the lineup at this point?
I'm kind of looking at like who I feel good about, I guess, and one of those guys I feel like is Joey Ramos. Obviously, he missed all of last season, but in the fall camp, before he was injured, he definitely proved himself as a player that you could play at multiple positions, kind of set the tone on the line. It seemed like ASU, they would run to his side, more often than not when he was in the lineup. And I feel like he had a more consistent spring than some of the other members on the line.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the defensive line, like I said, Brad, it's just an absolute incomplete picture with the injuries. I mean, Aaron Frost, I think might even be like a bigger absence than Ben Coleman. Although with Ben Coleman, you just have players, no disrespect to those players that were on the first team that you just knew that once preseason camp rolls in August, they're not going to even sniff the first team. But I also think that that the play from the right tackle wasn't really what you expected, and I think the absence of Aaron Frost was probably felt more than people realized. To me, the big question is, are they going to go after a left tackle? I mean, I think Isaiah Glass had an okay spring.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, again, when you're just going back to that overarching element of, okay, how do coaches view players that were recruited by the former coaching staff? Do they want to bring their quote-unquote own guy into the mix? And I don't have to explain how important left tackle is when you have a right-handed quarterback. So I'm just wondering, like in the portal, aside from looking at somebody who can successfully replace Ben Coleman at the left guard position, and maybe is Sione Finau, the grad transfer from Purdue that is already in the fold. Does Arizona State still try to look at another guard? Do they try to still look at a left tackle? Or they try to look at both at this point, which now goes to another aspect of how do you fit everything in an 85 scholarship limit, which ASU is just teetering on that limit right now. But, you just cannot overstate enough. This is such an incomplete picture by the offensive line, and I'm not saying this to appease the concerns out there because there definitely are concerns. But we just don't know what we're getting from this offensive line, and whatever the answer to that question is, it better be a pleasing one for this coaching staff in August. Otherwise, this could be somewhat of a disappointing season just because of the front five.
Yeah, Leaf Fatano, I thought, did a pretty solid job at center, the UNLV transfer. But, yeah, just, without guys like Frost, kind of locking it down. Bram Walden, who was, one of the highest-rated recruits come out of the state in a while. The Oregon transfer, not being able to get out there and compete throughout the entirety of spring. Joey Ramos, of course, did his stuff, and he has that versatility to play any position along the line, really. But, yeah, this is, I think, a high priority in terms of the shopping list that we'll get to a little bit later on. Moving on to the defensive line, though, it's kind of a tale of two situations, inside versus outside. Let's start outside, and Cole, BJ Green was a menace.
Oh my gosh. I think it was hard not to tweet about him, every practice, because he'd just do something.
Yeah.
And at times, he would get so in the quarterback's face that and you're not supposed to hit the quarterback, but I mean, when you've got just such a ball of momentum and energy coming at you, it's hard to slow that down. And I'd be remiss to say if the quarterback didn't end up on the turf a few times when BJ was rushing his side. So he just looks on an entirely different planet. He looks, the word I keep coming back to is just ravenous. He exited the portal after I think it was a week in there, and just came back with a mindset to just lock this edge roll down and become one of the team's best players on that line. And I would definitely say he's one of the defensive keystones for the season. I mean, he's just been that good.
And we've also seen him going back to what he's been the last couple of years. He's had some snaps inside as well, and having success there. And it's a comment I believe that both Dillingham and Ward made of just in terms of we might play with four edges out there, four end guys. And as we talked about perhaps some of the issues on the defensive interior, maybe you might have to. But overall, just those edges, outside of Green, Clayton Smith, I thought at times really looked a part of that former 5-star recruit, looked really good. Ashley Williams was pretty good, coming in as a true freshman as well. But just, the attacking defense. And I talked to a few of the defenders, and some of the off-the-record comments, they were so happy about just not having to play like they did last year. They felt finally free to get after it and bring a fight to the offense. So it was good to see there. But those edges are impossible not to just Prince Dorba, I would be remiss to not mention as well, the Texas transfer, just getting after it from the edge spot and making life miserable for an opposing offense. And, for basically the last season and a half, there's been really no pass rush. and now all of a sudden they got some weapons.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, anybody that saw the Brian Ward defense at Washington State knows what his philosophy is in terms of the pass rush. Not only be just old school coming from the edge, but just really being exotic with a lot of different coverages. I mean, ASU obviously was the quote-unquote beneficiary of Brian Ward's wrath in that game in Pullman back in the middle of November. But, it's an absolutely impressive lineup of edge players. I mean, I think we saw it from the get-go, Brad, when we saw the transfer portal entries coming one by one. It's like, wow, they're really loading up at edge. But now it's a matter of, okay, do you just have a lot of bodies, then maybe one or two kind of surface up to the top? But, you can really go down the list. I mean, players I did not mention yet, Elijah O'Neal, a junior college transfer. Dylan Hall, a returning player that I think had some flashes, here and there.
One of those scrimmages, he had 2 or 3 sacks.
Yeah. I mean, does he get lost in the mix in August? I don't know. That'll be interesting to see. Garen Stansbury, I mean, you talk about maybe the highest potential player, maybe not only on defense, but just maybe on the entire team. That definitely did show a lot. And one name we're not mentioning is Michael Matus, because Michael Matus is still rehabbing from his ACL injury from last year. I would say among all the edge players, if you're looking for that reliable run stopper, I think Matus definitely fits the bill over there. And I'm curious to see, how this group does when you have just a really capable offensive line actually opening really sizable gaps, especially for Scatabo. How does that defensive line, especially at the edge, really deal with that new element, if you will, that hopefully is going to reveal itself in August? But I'm really curious to see how Michael Matus does fit in here, because his skill set, his arsenal of tools is really more geared to, I guess, stopping the run rather than being that menacing pass rush. But can you still find a place for Michael Matus to be that everyday starter? I think that's going to be a really maybe somewhat under the radar question come preseason camp.
I mean, if nothing else, I mean, obviously there's more to it, but if nothing else, it's positivity. It's trajectory in a good direction. It's like you mentioned, a lot of names. You have former 5-star recruits or incoming 4-star recruit. I mean, it was kind of a who's who in some respect. And so the worst thing that could happen is for them all just to, completely flounder and have it be something where you're no better off than where you began. So a lot of hope, and it could be a lot of tough decisions to be made, and figuring out the rotation and seeing how that will go, because you've got a lot of bodies that are producing. And if they can get to the quarterback, man, that can really mitigate some issues if they do exist on the interior of the defensive line or elsewhere on the defense. I mean, that will be quite the game changer. And even if we're going on the offense, if you're saying if the offensive line is going to be a concern, okay, how can you try to counter that by getting to the quarterback and making it tough for opposing offenses or forcing turnovers? A lot can happen when you can get a pass rush. So if that can translate in the fall, that would be a huge win. And like you mentioned, Brad, different than what we've seen in what seems like a very long time.
And I did just real quick. I did another podcast interview earlier today, and they were kind of knocking down the play of the defensive backs for Arizona State. And I said, guys, you have to keep in mind that there was no pass rush at all for ASU. So don't be so quick to knock down the defensive backs. I know a lot of them aren't here anymore, of Arizona State in 2022. That was a very capable group.
And they played in a scheme that was entirely
exactly. That defensive line had such an adverse domino effect on that defensive back group, and I know we'll get to that group in a few minutes. But that's a real capable group. That, I mean, on its own, I think is going to be maybe an upgrade over last year. But now, just you take that, and now you got a much more capable pass rush on paper. This defense can really be special in 23.
Yeah. And so intrigued as I am on the edge guys and coming after the quarterback and the offense, I'm equally concerned about the interior. We talked about the departures in there. None of those guys necessarily were looked at as probably starters, but just real thin. And I mentioned, I thought that they needed to add at least two good, capable, experienced bodies on the defensive interior. You have Anthony Cooper making that slide inside. He's a veteran presence. We talked about CJ Fight, Tristan Monday. Those guys don't have CJ Fight has no college experience, and Tristan Monday, I don't know if he got it. Didn't see the field at all, or maybe preserved his red shirt. for Wisconsin.
Sparingly in Wisconsin.
Yeah, so not a whole lot there. You have Sam Benjamin, the Idaho State transfer, coming in as well. You're getting some true freshmen in Landon Thomas and Kyron Berta over the summer, but you have Anthony Cooper, who's spent most of his time at defensive end, is now your most experienced defensive tackle on the inside there. I'm real worried. Like, how worried should ASU fans be about the current state coming out of spring of the defensive tackle spots?
I don't know. I need to see Landon Thomas and Kyron Berta, because what that tells me is the coaching staff is looking at which players that they've already deemed, aren't fit to play at the Pac-12 level that the old staff recruited, and kind of gave them a recommendation of, hey, enter the portal and see where you could get another chance elsewhere. Because I think they know that the incoming freshmen that they have the makeup, have the skill set to kind of reach that potential of being kind of those anchors of the defensive tackle position. And
can you count on them though as true freshmen? And they always say it's harder to play right away the closer you are to that line, and you're in the trenches.
But on that general topic, I don't know, how vague we need to be, but it seems like there's at least some encouraging information that's been coming out about a possible.
Yeah, one Deshaun Mallory, who actually was on the official website on the roster in the beginning of the year until he wasn't. But long story short, it looks like Deshaun Mallory, the transfer from Michigan State, fingers crossed if you're an ASU fan, is going to be coming to ASU after all. Obviously, at this point, in time for summer workouts, because he wasn't able to come here for the spring. So that definitely can be a sizable addition, no pun intended, for the interior defensive line. But not still the Thunder on one of the later segments over here. That is definitely on the shopping list of the transfer portal. If they can just get rid of this really 4 good interior defensive linemen, just to have a pretty good 2 deep, yeah, they're going to be fine. And hey, even a guy like a true freshman like Landon Thomas, show him some love. He's the reason Ashley Williams is on the team right now. So throw him a bone or something.
All right, so we'll talk about just what we need to do in terms of getting that defensive tackle spots kind of beefed up a little bit, and if Mallory is able to come on board, that he was there and then he wasn't, so maybe he's back. We'll see. Starting off and then moving back a level to linebacker. Now, of course, this is going to be a base 4-2-5. Travion Brown I thought was kind of as advertised, a good veteran linebacker at the Pac-12 level. Of course, somebody who's very familiar, and talking to guys like Will Schaefer, James Joncom, they were really kind of leaning on Brown as a guy who could teach them the intricacies of this defensive scheme. Cole, what jumped out to you about the overall, just kind of the state of the linebacker play over those 13 practices?
It's hard to replace veterans like Kyle Soley and Merlin Robinson, but you kind of replaced them with people that look the part, like Travion Brown and James Joncom. Like, you pick them out in a locker room and be like, okay, yeah, those guys are linebackers, and you'd be right. Like, they just have the frame, they have the size, they hit people hard, they get up, giddy that they just hit someone hard. And then Will, I mean, he changed numbers. He's number 8. He looks faster in that single digit. Like, flies from sideline to sideline. He's made some great plays over there, just chasing the run direction and then just getting ahead of the blockers, beating them to the point of contact. I liked what I saw from them, especially since defensive coordinator Brian Ward is going to use them in very interesting ways to bring pressure and confuse the offensive line. I mean, these guys could be rushing the passer or dropping in a coverage every single play. You don't know what's coming from them. I think they'll get their opportunities to go quarterback hunting this season.
I thought Caleb McCullough had a strong finish to spring. Perhaps the guy was maybe overshadowed a little bit, but there's, I think it was the one with the final practices. Like, it just seemed like near the end, like we were just talking about, like tweeting about him a ton because he was making some big time plays. But you have just those 2 guys out there, but Brown and Schaefer, you feel pretty good. I really like what I saw from Joncom as well. Just wondering, Tate Romney and Crew Jackson, some local transfers that came back. Is that enough? I mean, you have Kavion Thunderbird coming in over the summer, but is this group deep enough? Considering that there's a lot of Travion Brown wasn't even just like a full-time starter for the Cougs. He was kind of like a part-time starter. Schaefer has just kind of had some starts here and there, but mostly a rotational player as well. So no guys here that are coming back that have consistent starting experience on their resume. How are we feeling about that coming after what we saw through this through spring ball?
So a quick note, just so we talk about Javen Jacobs paying that Scottsdale Suara homage, number 8, DJ Foster jersey number. Same thing with Will Schaefer, by the way.
Oh.
But you can see also a bunch of pictures of Will Schaefer as a youngin right there with DJ Foster taking pictures. But I don't know. I might be in the minority here, but I think maybe the linebackers showed just enough that they don't have to dip into the portal. And again, the numbers are getting really dicey right now. And I can't put linebacker as a transfer portal need on the same level as offensive line and defensive line. I don't think that's even close in my book over here. So maybe the linebackers as a group showed just enough that you don't have to dip into the portal. And if Crew Jackson, Tate Romney are your number 3 linebackers, okay, maybe you can live with that in terms of depth. Maybe just in general, because it is a 4-2-5 scheme, so you don't need your traditional 3 linebackers on the field on each and every down. Does that really, help the cause over here? Can you have maybe some defensive lineman, maybe like a Prince Dorber, for example, just actually slide down and play linebacker? I think a guy like Brian Ward is a proven tactician to really move the chess pieces as he needs. Not only a linebacker, but just really every spot on this side of the ball. So maybe linebackers actually they're doing okay. Maybe just you're feeling better now as a coaching staff than you did, in the beginning of March.
All right, moving on to the secondary. Let's start with the back end first. Now, of course, there's going to be a little shakeup there with kind of the new scheme, but overall, I thought the new safeties in Xavier Alford and Shamari Simmons were great. Mm-hmm. I was really excited to see them in action, and I thought they got better each and every day. And of course, Simmons, the guy making the jump up from FCS, Alford coming over from USC, and it was like kind of a quiet spring for Chris Edmonds. I thought, at least and relative to the newcomers back there, really kind of pushing for those reps out there. I know, Cole, that you're really excited about some of the stuff going on at that safety position.
Yeah, no, especially just the role that they can play, especially with Ward being their position coach, teaching them the ins and outs of the defense. They're going to be, the shot callers back there. They're going to be tasked with getting people aligned and identifying different route concepts and alerting the rest of the defense to it. And it was very encouraging to see Shamari Simmons and Xavier Alford both kind of assimilate into those roles and just really grasp the defense right away. I didn't see any blown plays that were over the head of the safety where it was the safety's fault. And they forgot to hawk their deep back end position, their post. I thought they didn't make any mistakes in that aspect, and that's what you kind of need as that blanket behind the defense. So, yeah, I guess you could say it was a quiet spring for Chris Edmonds, but I feel like he kind of fits that role of what Arizona State safeties, how they envision how they're going to play. They're going to make plays on the ball, and they're going to be reliable run fit stoppers, and I think that's what Edmonds showed last season. And so I think one of the goals for the Arizona State staff was to get the transfers acclimated quickly.
And then looking at the corner spot, I know you're always high on Ro Torrance, and he was really good. Also, I personally was impressed by Mason Williams. I thought that he had a really good spring as well. It seemed like Ed Woods missed some time a little bit, but Tarek Luckett was out there and making some plays. But how do you feel about Torrance and Williams as perhaps right now coming out of spring as your 1 and 2?
I like him. I think Mason, he has some of that same quick twitch athletic ability that you saw from Jack Jones. Got some runtime as a freshman, but he's obviously polished up his game since then and really developed into getting a reputation for supplying some of the hardest boomsticks on the team. When the run direction would head his direction, he showed no weakness staring down the running back and taking him one-on-one in space. So that's what I liked about Mason Williams. Gene Boyd was getting some runtime too at second cornerback. So, and especially since you've got some incoming freshmen at corner that will challenge some of these guys too. So I think it's a really competitive group. And that's what you want from your defensive backs. Those guys are supposed to be the loudest on the field, and they're supposed to. It's the toughest position out there on the football field outside of quarterback. So,
One of the interesting developments I thought was at nickel, when you had a couple guys that might have been a little under the radar in recent years. A name from the past, Willie Hartz, Sun Bowl, defensive MVP with his pick six in 2019.
Yep.
R.J. Reagan got some good run and reps there. Jordan Clark's the guy who has nickel experience, also saw some time at safety. How are we feeling about that third DB spot?
Yeah, I think Acer should feel really well. The question is about Willie Hartz. Can he stay healthy? Because what really plagued him in 2021 and 22, for that matter, some of it was really injury related. But I don't think it's any coincidence, at least not in my mind, that in 2019 they were still running a 5 defensive back alignment, a 3-3-5, not a 4-2-5, but nonetheless, Willie Hartz flourishing in a 5 defensive back alignment. Maybe that just really fits him, hand to glove. So no surprise maybe seeing Willie Hartz doing as well as he did. But again, that injury bug, is biting him again. So if he can stay healthy all throughout August, I think he could give Jordan Clark, a lot of fits over there. And I think Jordan Clark was also a guy that was missing some time due to injury, but definitely the proven player out of the 3 over there. I did like what I saw from R.J. Reagan as well. So I think it could be a really nice competition. And again, maybe just the health is really what's going to ultimately dictate who's going to be the starter, what the 2 deep's going to look like. But I think if you're an ASU fan, ASU coaching staff member, you should feel pretty good about what you have at nickelback.
Overall, Cole, like when you have this group, this secondary, with your corners, your nickel, your safeties, and you add like a competent pass rush, which flat out didn't happen last year. What are your thoughts? I mean, how should you feel if you're an ASU fan about your back end, assuming at least a base level of competence of getting after the quarterback?
Yeah, I feel really confident that these guys are going to have chances at opportunity, errant balls, interceptions, tipped balls. I think this defensive back group is going to be preying upon the causes of that pass rush. And so we see it in practice every single day. The first thing that they do is they line up, practice breaking on the ball, practice tracking the ball over their shoulder on deep routes, on undercutting flats and comebacks. Like, this is a defensive back group being trained to produce turnovers at a high rate. And I think if it's any indication from the practices and from the scrimmages that we've watched, that we're going to see a lot of those this season.
All right, Joe, overall, I mean, we have some questions on the offensive side, the offensive line, and even like quarterback, like who's going to win that job and how they're going to perform over a sustained stretch. But the defense was dreadful a year ago. But it seems like, as we talked about, there's some quality pieces here. But more than anything, it seems like the scheme and the aggression are night and day from a season ago. How big of an impact do you think that's going to have on kind of the overall course of this upcoming 2023 season?
I mean, it has the potential to be completely dramatic. I mean, you think about the nature of just the program last year, and you think about the coaches that were in place, especially on defense, especially when it comes to being in charge of the defense, and you think of the energy of the person who's in that position now versus last year. There are so many things just, qualitatively, intangibly, however you want to describe it, that are very different now than they were last season. I've said it many times that it just the feel around this program shifted dramatically in very short order with Dillingham and who he's brought on. So that has the potential to be there. Just with that energy alone can account for something. Now then, obviously, against the run last year, ASU was just an absolute nightmare. And that's kind of where you might have the concerns. We're talking about, okay, if you have an improved pass rush, if you have, competent defensive backs who aren't put in a bad position, that's very, very good. But when we have concerns about the interior of the defensive line, we have concerns about linebacker, that's where that element of things is probably going to shift to being a focus, or still the focus from last year, of making sure that this team just is not getting gashed by the run. So that kind of comes to the forefront of me as far as like the hit list, the to-do list, whether that is by way of adding players, whether that is just further development. That's a different type of conversation. But again, we've seen it before with this program. We saw it, with Dennis Erickson. We saw it with Todd Graham, a little bit with Herm Edwards. Just getting fresh faces and new energy in there can have a tangible result on the field, and I think that we're starting to see some of that, and we'll continue to see how that translates in the fall.
And I think, the fact that you have a defensive coordinator like Brian Ward, which I mentioned, did wonders to the Washington State defense last year. One thing I like about Ken Dillingham is a brutal honesty. And he said that preparing for Brian Ward and the Washington State defense kept him up later than any other defense he prepared for as Oregon's the defensive coordinator. The Oregon's offensive coordinator last year. And, the numbers kind of bear it out because I'm looking at the box score from that Oregon game at Washington State. Oregon won 44-41, but they scored 29 points in the fourth quarter. So they were struggling for 3 quarters. So when Kenny Dillingham was saying that this was a tough Brian Ward defense to prepare for, I mean, there definitely was some merit to that. And by the way, 7 of those 29 points were actually in an interception return for a touchdown. So even an Oregon offense, which was plenty explosive under Dillingham last year, when they played up there in Pullman and the Brian Ward defense, they definitely had issues. So I think when you have a defensive coordinator like Brian Ward who knows the landscape of the Pac-12, who has shown with his creativity and his tactician skills how he can counter offenses in this conference, I think you should be definitely excited for the prospects of this ASU defense. I know the bar was way low in 2022 and it's really easy to surpass it, but I think that the improvement you're going to see is really going to be night and day from what we saw last season.
All right, real quick before we dive into kind of the wrap up of some of the categories. Special teams, I thought Josh Carlson, the new punter, was okay. Mm-hmm. It didn't wow me, in terms of the Michael Turk, it just sounds different off his foot. Solid enough. Dario Longetto I thought was pretty solid as well. Mm-hmm. Some good consistency, some range from 50 plus. Kind of, maybe I feel a little bit better about him than I did coming into spring. Mm-hmm. But overall, I mean, not a tremendous needle move. Obviously, losing the first team all conference punter. Yeah. I think you're gonna have to step back. Maybe Carlson gets a little stronger over spring, but I think at this point in the career, he is who he is. But also with the offense mindset of Dillingham, not going to be punting as much.
Yeah, and I think you should be overall feeling good about the ASU specialist. A person that Joe even knows better than me, Steve Roush, is going to get those guys right in the offseason. But Dario Longetto, and I talked to Charlie Regal about that because he did play for Regal in Cal 2 years ago when Regal was the special teams coordinator. And I asked Regal about Dario Longetto having a tough 2022 season in Cal. And then Regal said there were some mitigating circumstances over there, but maybe. In between the lines, you could read but I wasn't there at Cal last year as a special teams coordinator, and Dyer and I have this relationship that I can get him in playing pretty well. And look, again, if you talk about stats don't lie, the 2021 stats of Longetto at Cal under Regal are much better than the 22 stats when Regal was the head coach at Idaho State. So yeah, I think ASU should feel really good about Longetto. I don't think it's going to be a drop off from Carter Brown. Yeah, Josh Carlson, look, I mean, Eddie Stopinski, under the radar or not, was one of the best players for ASU last year. So, yeah, Josh Carlson definitely has some really, really huge shoes to fill. But I think he did okay. But, yeah, if you're going to tell me that he didn't look impressive in the spring as Eddie Stopinski did last year or Michael Turk in the years prior to that, I'm not going to fight you on that. But, again, like you said, maybe Kenny Dillingham doesn't want to punt that much anyway.
All right, so as we kind of wind down here, let's start off with some of the biggest stock risers, guys that, relative to your pre-spring expectations, have risen the most. So for me, that negates a guy like Conyers. As you mentioned earlier, Cole, just guys that I expected him to be great, and he was great, so not a whole lot of movement overall. I think he's great. For me, there's 4 guys on the offensive side to start out with. Scatabo, just because I was concerned about how is that going to translate. It translated very well. DeCarlos Brooks, because I was just always tweeting about him. Guillory, for me, just kind of another, all right, you did it on the FCS level, and he proved to me that he could. And I'm tossing in Bryce Pierre, because I was a little worried about just, okay, what if one of your top 2 guys goes down? I thought he made a lot of strides. So those are 4 guys that, again, relative to the expectations, I thought raised their stock the most. Who else caught your guys' eye?
I mean, I got to go with two that you mentioned, and of course, I'm not at the practices myself to see things on the granular levels that y'all do, but Scatabo and Guillory, because those are two players that making the FCS to FBS jump, and it's always kind of a question mark. Can they go like lateral move in being a standout at that level to a standout at this level? Do they go from being a standout to an okay player, or is it just a lost in translation? We just mentioned earlier in the episode, we were wondering a month or two ago, will ASU be comfortable with its starting running back coming out of the spring, or will it have to shop for a new one? We were kind of 50-50 in that regard heading into things. Now that's a very different narrative, like we've discussed. And Guillory, we were thinking, is this someone that maybe will be just a downfield threat or kind of just like a niche bit type of guy that can contribute a little bit here and there, or is it someone that has a diverse enough skill set to be a full-time starter? And obviously he's shown his stuff there as well. And you talk about Simmons too. A lot of these, I guess the ones that really catch my eye in this regard are those ones who were the FCS level transfers, who are showing that, at least in this first sample, that they have what it takes not just to play at this level, but to be legitimate starters and contribute at a high level.
All right, Hode, who moved the needle for you on offense?
Yeah, I think Bryce Pierre, under the radar or not, is a great call. And because I know it's really easy to get lost in the shadow, definitely of Conyers, but even Messiah Swinson for that matter. But yeah, I think Bryce Pierre really showed a lot. He can do a whole lot worse than a number 3 tight end than having something like Bryce Pierre. Joey Ramos, I think, in terms of just being the most consistent offensive lineman, along with Thifa Fatno at center. I think that he definitely deserves his due, especially coming off an ACL injury. I mean, sure, he's a veteran player at the Power 5 level, but you never know when you get from a player that missed a whole season, how much rust they have to knock off. I was really impressed with Joey Ramos. I mean, yeah, Scatabo, that goes without saying. I'll put the disclaimer somewhat of Tevin White being banged up, probably not giving Scatabo more run for his money. That's why I think August, that's going to be one of the more intriguing position battles, at least in my eyes, to see those running backs really battling each other. And again, going back to my earlier point, is Tevin White going to force the running back by committee to finally be employed at that position, or is it really going to be Scatabo's show, or maybe even Tevin White's show when it's all said and done? But yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head on all the same players that I mentioned. Again, I would just throw in Joey Ramos in there too.
How about you, Cole?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say Trenton Bourget, just because I don't feel like I expect him to be head and shoulders above the competition at this stage, just because of the new offense, like having to learn it, getting integrated with just a new roster of playmakers too. Even though there are some of those big fishes that carry over from last season, but it was pretty clear, like Trenton came to spring with a mindset to lock down this job early, and he didn't really do anything. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, that we said earlier. Like, he just had the highest completion percentage. The offense flowed underneath him. He definitely looks like the favorite. And then, Scatabo and Guillory, just because those guys are transfers that are looking to make instant impacts. And from what we saw at spring camp, it seems like they'll be playing focal roles of this offense in the fall.
All right, on defense, I think the two transfer safeties, I think we're all impressed with is Simmons, Alford. To me, like Willie Hart's when he's healthy. I had, linebacker Will Schaefer. Well, he kind of popped to me because I expected Trey Brown to be kind of, what he was. The veteran presence and very solid. Clayton Smith, I had some questions just because we've seen a lot of like blue chip guys come in and just like, you're at your best as a recruit. You're good at 18, but you're not living up to that. I thought he showed a lot of flashes, and I'm going to put BJ Green because he was just the destroyer of worlds, and he's of course the leader of the last 2 seasons, the team leader in sacks, just 2.5 last year. But man, it's hard to overstate just how impressive he was on a daily basis.
Yeah, I guess I cheated because I said Simmons in the last round, but I was going to say Green as well. Because I, kind of wondered, is he going to be like a Junior Onyeli 2.0 of someone who peaks as a freshman and then kind of trickles off as, a one-trick pony type of thing, a little undersized for the position that he played as Onyeli was about 10 years ago. But, man, based on everything that you all are saying, that I've been reading, that I've been hearing about, it seems like he's just about to hit the gas in a major way and really kickstart that rejuvenated pass rush. Hearing about him be the menace that he's been described as is very refreshing, and obviously makes that decision of his to enter and withdraw from the transfer portal all the more satisfying for Sun Devil fans.
Yeah, I think C.J. Fight was. As a true freshman, I mean, you definitely know what to expect, especially one of the most physically demanding positions out there. Absolutely, a stock riser, and maybe, and to a lesser extent, maybe a guy like Tristan Munday, who again just didn't make a splash at all at Wisconsin, and maybe by default because players around him really weren't stepping up. But I think definitely did show some flashes over there. James Joncom. Remember, he was teetering last year between linebacker and defensive end. I mean, he definitely has a body for a linebacker, but he has a body for defensive end, if you want to be honest about it. But he's definitely a stock riser, especially in the latter part. And again, I think, going back to an early point that I made, I don't feel that maybe the need to add a linebacker in the portal seems as dire as maybe it appeared a few weeks ago. And I think a guy like James Joncom is definitely one reason for that probably shift in thinking. And I would say, Xavier Alford, another player that missed all of last season. You don't know how they come in, even though they're a veteran Power 5 guy, let alone a guy that played, only in the Pac-12 in the Power 5 level. What kind of production you get from him. And I think Xavier Alford, not to go on a tangent over here, but just like a perfect example how when the mental's right, that just trickles down to the physical. I've never seen any newcomer, whether it be transfer, freshman, junior college transfer, so damn happy to be here. I mean, that is like a walking advertisement for the Arizona Tourism Board, if there is such a thing. I mean, it's like, oh, I love Tempe. Oh, I feel like home. Oh, it's great over here. And yeah, maybe all four of us here take the Valley for granted. Maricopa County is still the most transient county in a positive manner as far as most people moving in here, year in and year out. And Xavier Alford is another satisfied customer. But I did not know what all from expect from him. And going back to an earlier point that you made, Chris Edmonds kind of being in the shadows. A guy like Xavier Alford is probably responsible for some of that did transpire in spring practice. But those are the stock risers to me.
Anybody else we left off, Cole?
No, I had BJ, CJ Fight, and Shamari Simmons. And I think all the reasons that you guys gave are pretty much the same reasons for me. I mean, Shamari, he hits hard and he gets the ball. And CJ, he plugs gaps and gets in the backfield. And BJ is just an alien. So I don't feel the need to expand on the analysis.
I felt really foolish. Leaving Fight and Joncom off the list. That's my bad. Joncom, especially, I had talking to him after one of the scrimmages. I've never seen a player more happy to be in a new system.
Yeah,
he it was fun. Great. He drops into the third person pro wrestling style. Just talking the Ginger Freak's so happy to be in this defense. It's great. We got to get him back on the show. Tremendous content. Yeah. Speaking of the quick wrestling tangent, Joe, you're wearing a Shawn Michaels shirt. I can't help but think that's intentional based on Jalen Conyers' touchdown celebration. What was your reaction, and how did his Sweet Chin Music celebration go?
I mean, I got a lot of respect for the guy, and he just keeps he just keeps earning more and more credit. With everything that he does, he's becoming a real big deal in a lot of capacities. So the man can do no wrong, including the celebrations. I dig it. It gets my applause. Just want to see, give me 15 of them in the fall, and we'll be real good.
All right. So before we get and wrap things up with the shopping and to-do list, spring MVPs, one on each side of the ball. For me, defense, clearly BJ Green. Offense, I'm going to go Cam Scatterbo because I think he showed he can be a productive feature back at this level. For my honorable mentions, Guillory and Shamari Simmons. But all right, Hode, offense, defense, who are you thinking?
Scatterbo, honorable mention Jalen Conyers because I think it's just impossible to keep him off the list in the capacity. Defense, I'm going to go Clayton Smith because I know for a fact he was the highest rated player on defense throughout spring practice. There's another nugget that was able to get post spring. So I got to put him because the coaching staff obviously thought he was the best. As far as an honorable mention, yeah, Shamari Simmons / Xavier Alford. I mean, almost like the same person to me at this point, but just elevated a safety group that wasn't that bad to begin with in 2022, elevated to a whole different level.
How about you, Cole?
I'm going BJ and Conyers just because I didn't see the defense for as good as they were, rushing the passer, going one-on-one on the boundary. Like, this defense still doesn't have any answers for Conyers, and I don't think any Pac-12 defense will truly find a way to stop him. We haven't seen it yet so far in practice, so
it just probably involves like actual physical criminal assault at this point. Joe, who are your MVPs?
So mine are going to be kind of more on perception than the deeper analysis that you all have. I'm gonna go BJ Green on defense. Offense, I'll go with Trent Bourguet because with the level of competition that there was with highly recruited incoming freshman, a guy who's got starting experience at a major college program in Pine, and for folks who are as tuned in as anybody on this planet to be sitting here and saying that Trent Bourguet is head and shoulders above the field, that to me shows that the guy went out there, did some major work, and as was mentioned, came back from injury maybe a little early, so it may not have been 100%. So to take on that challenge and accept it and to thrive through it, that's something that I think will pay long-term dividends. Again, using the statement that I've been making of the iron sharpen iron. I mean, we could see the best version of Bourguet out here in the fall. So some credit due for that.
And really in an offense that doesn't require a lot from its quarterback, which I think is really going to fit Bourguet like a glove.
Yeah, and let's put an end to this great conversation with this, just kind of our shopping and to-do list. Now that we know what has transpired during spring, where the position battles currently stand, what we saw from the guys out there, two things stand above the rest. And football is one in the trenches. ASU has some questions, severe questions on the offensive line. I think they need to go shopping, get at least a couple guys in there with some experience. And on the defensive tackle specifically, as we talked about, I feel great about the edges. Feel fantastic. But land two guys, whether one is in fact Mallory, and hoping he gets those things straightened out. Because the questions at linebacker and running back, I think, if they don't make any additions, I feel pretty good about based on what we saw. Obviously, depth always helps. I think the scars of 2016 and ASU's injury issues there, you never know. But I think for me, the offensive line and the defensive tackle specifically far outweigh anything else on this roster currently. Joe, how about you? What are you doing in terms of additions and also some things that you'd like to see over the summer?
Yeah, I mean, offensive tackle, defensive tackle. I'm good with the linebacker. Maybe if it's someone who is, I think the perfect fit there. You may not have to target someone who is a starting caliber player right now. Maybe just somebody with some youth and some upside where, again, not necessarily a grad transfer or someone that you got a limited shelf life with, unless somebody kind of falls into your lap there. I would be okay with them going after that. Is there an absolute need? Maybe not, but I think getting some more bodies at linebacker would be good. You can kind of pepper some others in as well, but those are the main areas if you're talking about possibly, looking for starters. As far as, the to-do list, obviously shoring up the offensive line, that's just like the biggest thing because not only is there a need for that, but that is just such a drastic position group in the sense of, we could be easily talking about the difference between not just one, but maybe a few wins and losses based on how that offensive line shakes out. So that's going to be really the number one thing for me. And then, really figuring out how things function at running back. Is Scatabo the man? And when I say the man, I mean in the sense of what we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years. Is it, we've talked about kind of the possibilities there. So I think just really ironing out the starting lineup and getting some bodies in the trenches and, some at linebacker as well. And, you could be in decent shape.
I think you have necessity and you have luxury. Necessity, like you said, Rad, offensive line, defensive tackle, enough said. I think we definitely have them hashed out that point. The luxury is going to be maybe linebacker and maybe running back. Again, I don't know if the numbers are going to allow it unless we see, 4 or 5 players still being added to the attrition, still being in the transfer portal. I have at ASU right now just around that 85 mark. So, we'll see if more attrition happens, which allows you maybe to dip into linebacker and running back. But as it is, you need some more attrition to add probably as many as offensive and defensive linemen that you really have to at this point.
Cole, what are you doing for the in the portal, and also just kind of the things you want to get ready for this team to get ready for fall camp?
Yeah, I mean, probably just shore up the trenches. I think it was pretty clear, like, based on the transfers that we've seen over the past few days and the offensive line play over the course of the 3 or 4 weeks of spring bowl that we witnessed, that should be a priority. Off season, you just gotta make sure that you keep this momentum snowballing. I feel like, I mean, you just generated a bunch of positive implementations in practice where you felt like the team was engaged and you were getting stuff done and executed, and you definitely left spring ball in a place, in a mindset where you were encouraged by what you saw and your chances of outperforming expectations in the fall. And now as we head into this sort of dead period of the summer where, it's the dog days of summer and it gets hot here in Tempe, like there's distractions. You got to make sure that everyone's still focused on that same goal. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm sure Dillingham and, we'll find some creative ways to make that happen.
All right, so that is spring ball for the Sun Devils. I think that's pretty good top to bottom look at everything that transpired over the last, 5 weeks or so. Obviously, the portal is going to be open through the end of this month, so definitely stay with us on that side and stay plugged in to the huddle on DevilsDigest.com. Hode, for the 4 people in the world that are not already in the huddle, how can they follow along with all the great stuff that you and your team are doing?
Sure, absolutely. DevilsDigest.com is the website. Like Brad said, the transfer portal alone is going to give us plenty to talk to over the next few weeks. Not only football, but basketball. And Joey, the basketball transfer portal actually closes on May 11th. So we're not even talking about transfer portal news stopping anytime soon in that sport. So, but plenty to talk about that. What I also like to do this time of year is go around the Pac-12 with all the opponents that ASU has lined up in conference play to see how their respective spring practices, have gone. What are some of the trends, strengths, shortcomings that those future opponents of ASU displayed during the spring. So that's another thing we have planned. And obviously, interviews with ASU players, ASU coaches, both football and basketball. And we didn't talk at all baseball over here. Top 25 team, ASU, Wednesday game in Tucson, hosting number 25, Oregon State this weekend. Some huge games for the Sun Devils coming up. You talk about a turnaround. I mean, this team – the beginning of March was, I don't know, they were below 500, Joe, right? Or maybe it looks like 6-9 or something. And
started off strong and then hit the skids and then just really turned things around and doing so through some pretty serious injuries. I mean, lose Ethan Long for the year at a pretty early point in the season. Yeah, I mean, what Willie Bloomquist is doing right now, I mean, if this trend continues, he's looking at almost a lock at this point as being the coach of the year in the Pac-12. I mean, it's just an incredible job. And you can learn about it from Cole's arch nemesis, Joe Bloater, by his content on Devils Digest.
Yeah, we might actually have to have him on maybe next week or something. He called this the most crucial 2-week stretch of the season for the Sun Devils.
Yeah.
He reached out. He wants to talk about it, so we might have to acquiesce. Because, I mean, right now, Cole, your lead's insurmountable. I don't want to say
I feel pretty good about it. I don't think this is my last time on the pod.
Oh, so. What if ASU makes a run to Omaha and we got to bring him on every week,
daily podcast,
every day, emergency podcast.
So Cole, obviously, you mentioned you're on the precipice of adulthood in terms of getting that degree, hitting the real world with the rest of us. But also, tremendous content that you've been putting out for years here at DevilsDigest.com, but also, elsewhere as well. How can folks stay dialed into you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at HamAnalysis. And, it's been a fun time on the Digest staff over the last 2 years, getting ready to graduate. I feel like I'll still be around in some capacity. I'm sure I'm just as interested in this program as everyone else is, and being able to analyze just Dillingham's scheme and Brian Ward's scheme. It's is definitely the most advanced that I've experienced in my 4 years here. So I'm excited about the trajectory and just in general the program.
Well, I mean, you could, grad school's an option. You can stick around for a couple more years on the digest.
It's like the Billy Madison line, like, don't ever leave, shaking it in the face. Like, dude, trust me. Take the 8, 9, 10, 12, 15-year route.
Yeah, man. Adulting,
just fail these remaining classes that you got. Just, be a legend and just, opt out of graduating and just let it ride. That's my suggestion.
The turn from ace analyst to, the Van Wilder of local sports media would be something. Anyway, so make sure you stay with us on the show on the social media side of things. On Twitter at SOTD Podcast, on Instagram at Speak of the Devils. You can find us on Facebook, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at BDenny29.
And you can follow me at Joe Healy 42. Of course, you heard all the wonderful reasons to support Devil's Digest, not just because they're sitting here, but of course a longtime, highly valued sponsor of the show. And a shout out to our other sponsors as well, including DeFalco's Deli. I heard some close friends and supporters made their way to DeFalco's last week as I was tied into some Twitter responses, and it always gets everybody talking about their favorites. You love to see that. So
by the way, Joe, I finally took your advice and did obviously my love for the Il Priesta is well known, but I know you've been a focaccia advocate.
Yes,
I saw that picture on Twitter yesterday. I had dinner. I called an audible, got to the line, saw that picture, and oh my God, that's a game changer.
It's a difference maker. There's something about the it's like a unique ingredients with the meat and the basil, right? I don't know, just something about it hits different with the focaccia bread. I mean, you can't go wrong, but it's a different. I do sub roll on just about everything else, but the Il Purista, it works right with the focaccia. But yeah, go ahead and get yourself a meal of food down there. Huge shout out to our wonderful friends at Jones Auto Group, hooking people up. We've got some testimonies that we're working on getting. Some very, very close friends of ours made the wonderful decision to purchase a new vehicle through Jones Auto Group, and we're very grateful for that. And obviously, as you know, Jones is heavily involved when it comes to supporting ASU student athletes from the NIL perspective, as well as just supporting Sun Devils of all kinds. So great folks over there. So we're planning on getting them involved. We did that interview that we did with Joey from Spaghetti Shack not long ago. Now that we're entering a little downtime in the calendar year, you're going to be hearing from some more of our sponsors in that regard. Just mentioned Joey, Spaghetti Shack. Shout out to them. I know they're moving forward with big things, so you can always support them. You know that they're very, very deeply involved in everything dealing with ASU. And last but not least, the great folks at Sun Devil Family Charities, and you can support them by checking out what they are involved with and what sort of needs they have at sundevilfamily.org.
Once you're done supporting our amazing sponsors, make sure to give us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. And Joe and I will be back soon, maybe next week, maybe with Jack Loader. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how things turn out as these Portal Madness and baseball season hits the home stretch.